Clive was born during difficult times. His father, Eddie, barely made ends meet, working 2 shifts at a factory, yet the money was never enough. His mother, Rhoda, tried to make their home cozy despite their modest income. While caring for the baby, she also tended to her sick mother-in-law, with whom they all lived. When Clive was 2 years old, his mother started leaving him with his grandmother and went to work at the factory, just like his father. Half the village worked there at the time. Clive's grandmother, Macy, was very old. She had Eddie late in life, and he was her youngest child. Clive had 3 aunts whom he had never met. His father and grandmother rarely spoke of them. The youngest aunt, Myra, married a garrison officer when she was barely 18. He took her somewhere west, where she still lived, sending occasional letters from various addresses. The middle aunt, Emily, married a wealthy man, but the marriage didn't work out. Her husband began cheating on her and then severely beat her when she asked for a divorce. Emily was a beautiful woman. Clive had seen her in old photos in his grandmother's album, always struck by her beauty. Emily fled abroad with part of her husband's fortune. Since then, he had been searching for her, coming to threaten Macy, his mother-in-law, but achieved nothing. The eldest aunt, Lila, was Macy's favorite daughter. She died early from tuberculosis, which she contracted while working as a nurse for 10 years. Clive often visited her tidy grave with his father to keep it in order. Clive was bored with his grandmother, who slept most of the time and never played with him. He was forced to stay at home, waiting for her to wake up to feed him or for his mother to come home from work and let him play outside. In the yard, he found ways to entertain himself, catching frogs, fighting with bushes, or climbing old trees by the fence, pretending to be a bandit. On weekends, he spent time with his father. They either went fishing or built another shed for his grandmother's chickens or geese. At 6 years old, Clive started school. He quickly realized he wouldn't be a top student. The teachers fussed over things that didn't matter to him, like a wrinkled notebook or messy hair. Even then, he understood he couldn't work like his father, wearing a uniform and following orders. He was too free-spirited and headstrong. Macy often scolded him as he ate lunch in the small kitchen after school. "What will become of you?" she would say. "Something will," Clive replied, shoving a spoonful of soup into his mouth, further dirtying his already stained shirt. "Fool! Who are you like?" "It's unclear. Probably like your mother." "Eddie isn't like this." Macy never showed any special love for her grandson. She didn't give him gifts on holidays or praise him. Instead, she diligently hid jars of jam from him. Clive didn't like his grandmother. So, when she first got sick and then died at the age of 80, he wasn't very upset. In fact, he was secretly happy, though he tried to hide his true feelings behind a furrowed brow and a serious face. During the service at the church, he thought about how his grandmother's room would now be his. He wouldn't have to sleep on the uncomfortable bed next to his parents anymore. Looking at the priest and his deceased grandmother, Clive was scared by his own thoughts. He shivered, asked her for forgiveness, and crossed himself. After all, she was his grandmother, his family. After the funeral, Clive's father started renovating the old house, sometimes involving Clive in the work. Only when the renovations were finished, several months later, did Clive find out that they wouldn't be living in the renovated house. His father had found a new job in the city. They were moving. Clive liked city life more than the village. There were so many opportunities to make money. In the village, he could only occasionally get some work from the neighbors. In the city, he first washed cars in the yard of their new apartment building, which they bought with the money from selling Macy's house. Then, when summer ended, he asked to help the janitor and raked leaves. At school, he started his first business. He sold notebooks at a high markup to students who urgently needed them for some reason. The principal found out about Clive's activities and called his parents to the school. "Your son is engaging in speculation. Are you aware? He's selling notebooks." "Young man, can you remind us how much you sell them for? Clive stayed silent, staring at the floor. His father placed a heavy hand on his shoulder. Oh. Eddie was surprised, thank you for letting us know. We'll talk to him at home, rest assured. Clive expected to be punished. But instead, his father just asked. How much did you make? Not much, Clive sniffled, not enough for a bike. Maybe half a bike. Oh, his father shook his head, not bad. Clever boy. I respect you for your resourcefulness. His mother, however, reacted with a scandal when she heard the news from school. If they expel you from school, don't come home, she yelled. You should be studying. Studying, not profiting off other kids. Why are you silent? She turned to her husband, slumped tiredly in his chair. Me? He perked up. What about me? A man should earn money. Clive did well. Not like this, she replied. How so? The boy showed resourcefulness, didn't steal anything, didn't extort money from other kids. Clive's mother spent the entire day scolding her son and husband for their foolish behavior. However, a month later, when Clive brought her a pair of brand new gloves she had been dreaming of, she was stunned and hugged him without mentioning the dishonest earnings. Still, Clive began to realize that what he was doing wasn't entirely honest, so he got a job as a courier at the local post office. Every morning before school, he would go to the post office, pick up a bag, and deliver newspapers and magazines. The pay was modest, but it was enough for gum and movie tickets. He didn't even think about university. He decided to finish school and start working. His father didn't mind, as he himself worked at the factory without a higher education. However, his mother tried for some time to persuade him to go to college, even saving money for his education. When Clive got a job at a construction site after school and started bringing home good money, his mother gave up. She handed him the small savings she had put aside for his education, saying, "This is for your future. Spend it wisely." Clive did just that. He bought his first toolbox with that money and started taking on various handyman jobs for the neighbors on weekends, fixing faucets, and assembling furniture. Suddenly, his father passed away 3 years before retirement. His mother's hair turned gray from grief, but she didn't lose her zest for life. She continued to talk with Clive in the evenings, sharing how her day went at the factory and inquiring about his activities. After his father's funeral, Clive promised himself that he would organize the life his mother deserved and take her to the sea. Rhoda had dreamed of the sea since childhood. Her father was a sailor, at least that's what her mother had told her. Her mother died of cancer, and Rhoda never found out anything more about her father, but she never stopped dreaming of the sea. Clive kept the upcoming trip a secret from his mother and on her birthday placed the tickets on the table. "Mom, we're going on vacation." Rhoda blinked in confusion. "Vacation? Me? Where?" "To the sea, we'll relax for a week." "Clive," his mother gasped. She couldn't say anything more. She hugged him, kissed his cheeks, and kept asking. "Are you serious? Is this real?" "I didn't get to fulfill Dad's dream of buying him a car," Clive replied, hugging her back, "but I want to make you happy." "Oh, you should have bought something for yourself," his mother wiped away her joyful tears. "I'll have time to live for myself. First, I want to thank you." "For what?" "For putting up with me all these years," Clive laughed. The trip to the sea became their first and last vacation together. That winter, Rhoda slipped on the street, lay on the cold ground unable to call for help, and became severely chilled. She was treated for pneumonia while also trying to save her broken hip. Her body, worn out from years of hard work, wasn't ready for such a burden. Rhoda died in the hospital without regaining consciousness. At her funeral, as at his father's, only Clive was present. Her colleagues didn't maintain friendly relations with her, and they had no other acquaintances in the city. For several days, Clive sorted through letters from his village friends, who wrote to say they couldn't attend the funeral due to impassable, snow-covered roads. Their heartfelt messages somewhat alleviated the emptiness he felt from the lonely funeral. He left the construction site and started his own business. Work became his refuge from the overwhelming loneliness. Spending hours on the phone and running around to client appointments, Clive forgot that his cramped apartment no longer had his father dozing on the creaky sofa or his mother bustling around the table with dishes. He even began to miss his grandmother Macy. Despite her constant grumbling, her presence was better than the oppressive silence. Clive's business grew rapidly. He rented an office, bought equipment, and started looking for a larger apartment. He also met Ned, who initially became a regular client of Clive's firm and later a friend. They often hung out in bars or at each other's homes after work, sharing how their days went and giving each other business advice. They had much in common. Both came to the city from the countryside. Both had lost their parents. Both had been trying to earn their own money since childhood. Clive's company provided construction equipment for rent. Ned's company recruited and managed construction workers. Eventually, Ned proposed a joint venture. "We need to merge," he said, opening a bottle of beer. "You supply the equipment, and I'll provide the workers." "You mean become contractors?" Clive asked, intrigued. "Yeah, it's a profitable business. There are many tenders. What do you think?" Clive discussed his friend's proposal with a lawyer. The lawyer checked out Ned's company, examining its taxes and financial transparency, and gave his verdict. "Clive, it's a solid business. You'll be earning 5 times more for sure. Prepare the merger documents," Clive replied succinctly. He trusted Ned like a brother. If the lawyer also deemed the proposal reasonable, there was no reason to hesitate. After the merger, both Ned and Clive quickly became wealthy. Ned bought a country house with a pool and married his beautiful secretary, Angelica. Clive purchased a large apartment with a panoramic view. On the day he moved in, he opened the boxes of his belongings and first placed photos of his parents on the mantelpiece. He said, "Look, Mom, Dad. Our dream came true. There's plenty of space for everyone here." Then he took out a photo of his grandmother Macy. She looked at Clive with her usual expression of disappointment and disdain. He smirked and put the photo on the shelf. "And hello to you too, Grandma. I see you're still not happy that I didn't become a bum, as you might have hoped. You'll have to get used to the fact that your grandson isn't such a fool." Clive developed an interest in tennis and began frequenting the gym. He used to think such activities were for the rich. And he never had time for weightlifting, dishes didn't wash themselves, and the wiring in their old apartment always needed fixing, so he and his father regularly repaired it every month. But now, in his new apartment, Penny, a woman from a cleaning agency, took care of the housework. The dishes and glasses sparkled, as did all the surfaces. A bouquet of fresh flowers always adorned the table, and the fridge was stocked with Clive's favorite foods. Ned handled most of the firm's business, giving Clive a lot of free time. However, this didn't bring him joy. Troubling thoughts invaded his mind, and a sense of melancholy settled over him. Ned suggested he find a young, energetic girlfriend to cheer him up and chase away his sadness. Clive had struggled with relationships since his youth. In school, he tried to court Gloria from the 8th grade while he was in 7th. She didn't appreciate his efforts. Bouquets, candies, and other gifts always ended up in the trash. Disheartened, Clive soon met Dina. She transferred to their school after moving and sat next to Clive. Always neatly dressed, modest, and kind, Dina impressed the perpetually disheveled Clive. Dina treated him more like a younger brother, explaining difficult topics, making him study, button up his shirt, and comb his hair. After the 9th grade, she started dating a childhood friend, leaving Clive alone again. After school, he had no time for girls, work consumed all his time. Then came the deaths of his parents and the creation of his company. Now, at 30, Clive had never been on a date. Although he now drove an expensive car and dressed well, girls would sometimes approach him to introduce themselves. But in their empty gazes, Clive saw an interest in his wallet, not in him. So, he didn't hurry to be charming in return. He would coldly say, "Sorry, I'm busy," and walk away, feeling their angry stares on his back. Sports became a great substitute for relationships. It kept intrusive thoughts of loneliness at bay and gave him energy. Yet, Clive knew this wasn't a real solution. He had reached an age where he wanted a family. He wanted to settle down, marry for love, and raise children. So, when an anonymous caller informed him one Saturday morning about some brewing issues in the firm, Clive was more pleased than upset. Finally, something to occupy his mind. He got dressed, had breakfast, and drove to the office. Their firm had been renting several floors in an elite building in the city center for 5 years. The rent was steep, but Ned insisted that prestige was worth the cost. When Clive entered the office, Ned was, as usual, on the phone with his wife Angelica, his feet propped up on the empty desk. "Yes, darling, you heard me right. I'm not paying for that. I don't have money for your pug, and if you want to buy him a bowl, earn it yourself." "That's right. No, I haven't lost my mind. Okay, I have to go, someone's here." Clive closed the door quietly behind him. Ned sighed heavily, grimacing. He took his feet off the desk, leaned back in his chair, and said, "Can you believe she wants to buy a bowl for her dog for 100,000 for its birthday? She gave me a dance for my birthday and wants to get a bowl for the dog. Isn't that something? And you're telling me I need to get married?" Clive laughed. "So, why are you here?" "We're not signing anything today," Ned asked. "Did something happen?" "You tell me," Clive replied, sitting down in the chair opposite Ned's desk. "I've heard we have some issues. People don't want to work, and they're complaining about conditions." "Who's saying that?" Ned perked up. "Just some rumors," Clive said. "Well, rumors," Ned smiled, "everything's fine. Do you really think I wouldn't tell you if we had problems? What about the high turnover rate?" "That's normal." Ned poured himself a glass of water and took a sip. "It's hot, people don't want to work. So, I politely let them go. Why waste their time and hours, right?" "So, you're firing them for good reason?" "Of course. You're acting strange." They discussed business matters. Ned remained confident and relaxed. It was clear that Clive's sudden appearance hadn't rattled him at all. Then how should I understand that phone call, Clive thought. Clive pretended to listen intently to Ned talking about his vacation while recalling the details of that morning. A man, clearly older, had called, saying he resigned because Ned, the employer, was infringing on workers' rights and making them perform tasks outside their job descriptions. What kind of tasks? Clive had asked. The caller refused to specify, saying he was too afraid for his safety and his family's to go into details. "If you don't believe me, go to the construction site yourself and see what the workers are doing," the caller advised at the end of the conversation. After saying goodbye to Ned, Clive lied and said he was heading to the gym. "I'm late today. I hope I can reschedule my workout. Next time, just call me ahead so you don't have to run back and forth," Ned replied, closing the door behind Clive. Instead of going to the gym, Clive headed to the construction site. His and Ned's company was currently working on a large project, an ice palace. Everything at the site looked quite decent. The machinery was operating, and there were builders in hard hats everywhere. Clive began to berate himself for being so trusting, believing a stranger over his best friend. What if it was just a silly prank? But something about the whole situation kept nagging at him. His trainer called to ask where he was. Clive apologized and said he wouldn't make it to training today. Then he found the nearest supermarket on his map and drove there. He bought the cheapest tracksuit, some cologne, flip-flops, a fanny pack, and a simple phone. He changed clothes, left his car a block away from the future ice palace, and walked to the site. Stopping at the gate covered with mesh, he called out in a changed, hoarse voice. Boss. Boss. Any work? For a couple of minutes, no one paid any attention to Clive. Some worker in a hard hat waved at him and said something, but Clive couldn't make it out over the noise of the machinery. He saw a whole delegation of workers heading towards him, led by a large man, presumably the foreman. "What do you want?" the large man asked. "I need a job," Clive replied with a foolish grin. "Got any work?" The big man waved his hand, and the gate opened. Clive stepped inside. "Come with me. Let's talk." The big man put his heavy hand on Clive's shoulder. "What's your name?" "Jalil," Clive lied. "Jalil, got any ID?" "I have nothing, boss," Clive replied, trying not to laugh. He was starting to enjoy this game. "Got nothing, it was all stolen, that's why I'm looking for work." "You're a good one," the big man patted Clive on the back. "I see you're strong. We need people like you, Jalil. Go over there, to the trailer." Inside, the trailer was set up as an office. A small table, dirty cups, folders with papers, and blueprints on numerous shelves. The big man closed the door behind them, sat at the table, and put his face under a small desk fan. "I'm Artie." "So, Jalil, do you like to work?" "I do. We're strict about everything here," Artie frowned. "We're required to register workers by the book. Can't hire without documents. But I'll make an exception for you if you work the night shift." "Night shift?" Clive was surprised. "Do they work nights here?" "Both night and day. No one wants the night shift. They've all gone soft," the foreman grumbled. "So, will you do it or not?" "I'll do it," Clive nodded. "Well, that's settled then. Pay is in the morning, in cash, you understand. Come at 10 tonight. Got it?" Leaving the construction site, Clive walked back to his car thoughtfully. He wondered if Ned knew that Artie was exploiting people, blatantly breaking all the laws by hiring illegal workers, likely underpaying them or withholding their wages entirely. It now made sense where that anonymous call had come from, a worker just like the one Clive was pretending to be. He agreed to the night shift, didn't get the promised money, and couldn't prove his case. No contract means no obligations from the boss to the workers. Clive wanted to call Ned and tell him what he had discovered, about the anonymous call, but decided to work the night shift first to confirm his suspicions. He changed clothes, had lunch, returned home, and took a nap. Penny, who was just finishing her cleaning, was startled to see Clive back home. "Clive, you scared me. You're home early today." "Sorry, Penny, I forgot to mention it. I think I might be coming down with something." "Oh," Penny sighed sympathetically, "do you want me to make you some broth? Go get some medicine." "No, I don't need anything. Thanks." "Are you done?" "I'm going to lie down in my room." After Penny left, Clive fell asleep almost immediately. He dreamt of the construction site, endless stairs, a chase, and the inability to escape. He woke up in a cold sweat and even thought he might actually be sick. He had dinner, put on the tracksuit he bought earlier, and headed to the construction site. There was no sound of machinery, it stood parked near the excavation pit, and there were no people around. However, when Clive approached the gate, it opened. Artie came out to meet him. "Jalil, my dear, come on in, we've been waiting for you." They entered a storage area where construction materials, particularly cement and sand for mixing, were kept. Clive noticed some movement. The room was dark, with only a small, dusty light bulb dimly illuminating the faces and backs of the workers and the pallets of bags. "You'll be working here tonight," Artie said. "The guys will show you what to do. The shift ends at 6 in the morning. You'll get paid based on how much you do. Got it?" Clive nodded with feigned timidity. Artie patted him on the back and yelled, "Hey, Don, here's the new guy for you." Don turned out to be a thin, elderly man with a sweaty bald head. He was dressed in everyday clothes, blue jeans, and a t-shirt, with ordinary gloves from a hardware store. Don walked up to Clive, gave him a stern once-over, and asked, "What's your name?" "Jaleel." "All right, grab some gloves. You'll be a loader today. We're moving these bags to the next hangar." "Got it? The guys will keep an eye on you. And I'll be watching too. Don't slack off, or you won't get paid." Clive obediently started working. Out of the corner of his eye, he studied the people working with him. They were all migrants. None of them had a helmet or the company's branded jacket, meaning they were all working illegally. The work was tough. Each cement bag was heavy and had to be loaded onto a platform and then transported over uneven ground to another storage area. Clive stopped to rest and catch his breath after each trip. At least he had some physical training. Some of the workers, exhausted, collapsed to the ground of the hangar. Then Don would approach them and demand in a stern voice, "Either work or get out of here." Some obediently got up, cursing, and went to load the next bag. Others continued to lie down, waving off the persistent Don. The latter, after catching their breath, would leave through the gates and never return. Clive counted 4 such departures. Including himself, about 20 guys were working. All of them were young and lean. Don didn't carry the bags himself, he just noted things in his logs and supervised the process, occasionally answering phone calls. "Yes, everything's fine, we're keeping up the pace, it'll be done by morning." As Clive wheeled another platform to the neighboring hangar, he pondered what he was doing. What was the point of moving bags from one hangar to another in the middle of the night? Why use illegal workers for this? Did Ned lack workers? Judging by what Clive saw during the day, there was no shortage of manpower at the construction site. Something wasn't right. Seizing a moment, he joined some workers who shared a cigarette with him. Clive cautiously lowered his voice and asked, "Why are we doing this, guys?" "What, moving bags?" one of them smirked. "To make money, brother, why else?" "No, I mean, why are we moving bags in the middle of the night? What's stopping us from doing this during the day?" Clive clarified. "Brother, don't get involved in that," a worker warned. "Just do your job. Let the bosses figure out what and why." "Exactly," the second one agreed, nodding. "How long are you planning to stand there smoking?" Don shouted. "Get back to work, now. I'll fine all 3 of you." Clive stubbed out his cigarette and returned to his bags. At 5 in the morning, when Clive and the others were yawning and moving sluggishly, a truck pulled into the construction site. Don, after speaking with the driver, approached the workers. "All right, unload it, guys." Clive was stunned. The truck was filled to the brim with cement bags. The workers obediently started unloading them onto platforms and hauling them to the empty hangar. "Why are you just standing there?" Don yelled at Clive. "Just resting, boss," Clive shrugged apologetically. "You'll rest at home," Don said. "Come on, Jaleel. Get to work." Clive, with his head down, went to get a platform. He loaded it with bags and hauled it to the hangar. It was clear that the other guys were just as tired. But they needed money, and he needed answers to the questions that kept multiplying with each hour he spent at the site. Clive's back ached, his palms burned with blisters, and his leg muscles were stiff. Gritting his teeth, he loaded the last bags onto the platform. After unloading them onto the hangar floor, he sat down, leaning his back against the bags, and heard Don shout outside. "Close it up, guys." Security guards entered the hangar. Clive recognized their uniforms, the same ones he had approved a couple of years ago. Each had an earpiece and a radio on their belt. The guards closed the hangar doors. 2 stayed by the entrance, and the rest went outside. The leader pointed at a few workers. You, and you. With me. The rest of you stay here." Clive heard some commotion outside the doors. The workers and guards were gone for about half an hour. Then Don and the head guard came back in. Don said, rubbing his hands together with satisfaction. "Well, the job's done. Good work. Go collect your pay, guys." Clive and the others left the hangar and lined up. Don and Artie were sitting at a plastic table, which had previously been in the office trailer. They were putting money into envelopes and marking it in a ledger. The guards kept a strict watch on the line to ensure no one crowded the table. Clive only now noticed the pistols in the pockets of each guard's trousers. He felt uneasy. When it was his turn, Artie yawned and smiled broadly. "So, Jalil, did you enjoy the work?" "Yes," Clive nodded. "Here you go. Come back at 10 tonight, and you'll get double." Clive quickly counted the money in the envelope. Don frowned. "Is there a problem?" "It's not much," Clive said quietly. He counted $50. Artie laughed. "What did you expect? You have no ID, no experience. The first shift is a trial and isn't paid in full," Don explained. Clive took his money and headed towards the gate. He noticed the tracks left by the truck. The truck itself was no longer on site. The guards by the gate were smoking and chatting. Clive approached them and asked for a cigarette. They exchanged glances. One of them, whom Clive recognized as the leader, pulled out a pack and handed it to him. "Didn't like it here?" "I thought I'd earn more," Clive replied, lighting the cigarette. "Well, today you just moved and unloaded. Tomorrow you'll be loading the truck, and you'll get paid more." "Loading what?" Clive asked. "You'll find out." The guard exhaled a cloud of smoke towards him. Clive pretended to leave but took a turn into a small nook and returned to the construction site. The guards were no longer by the gate. Clive lay on the ground and crawled through the grass towards the fence. He slipped under it and found himself back on the site. Looking around, he ran to Artie's trailer. The light was on inside. Clive pressed against the wall and listened. Inside were Artie and Don. "So, did they accept the goods?" asked the foreman. "Yes, they did," Don replied. "Payment is in the evening." "I'm dying to sleep," Artie yawned. Don laughed. "You just sit there, doing nothing. I'm the one running around, keeping an eye on these guys." "Running?" Artie interrupted. "Sure. You're drinking coffee and taking other people's money. I saw you. Aren't you ashamed, Don?" "I'm not taking other people's money, just fines for slacking off." "Like that new guy," Don said. Jalil. Jalil. He barely worked and still demanded money. "Yes, they've all gotten cheeky," Artie agreed. "Ned called today. You know what he said?" "What?" Clive came to see him. "Said there are rumors we're cheating the workers here. We've never seen him or heard from him, so why now? Is he bored or something?" "I don't know," Artie yawned again. "Ned said to be careful." "I'm telling you, be careful with the money." "I know." Clive stood, stunned. Ned knew everything. About the illegal workers, the night shifts, and the strange cement transfers from one hangar to another. Blood pounded in his temples. Clive clenched his fists. He wouldn't let it go. Ned, whom he considered a friend, was doing something dirty and illegal behind his back. Lying to his face. Clive, looking around, ran to the hangars. In the first one he had entered half an hour ago, there were stacks of cement bags unloaded from the truck. Clive took his old phone out of his bag and photographed a bag. Outwardly, it looked the same as those he had been moving all day. He looked closer at the photo and was shocked. The cement was low quality. When he had started his business 10 years ago, a representative of this cement manufacturer had tried to get him to sign a supply contract. However, they didn't provide any certifications or quality guarantees. "Our cement is very cheap," the representative had said with a smile. "It's important for you to fit into the budget, isn't it?" "What about quality?" Clive had asked. Quality is for those who can afford it, the representative had replied. He and Ned had always made sure the materials their company used were of high quality. Clive was certain he hadn't signed any contract with the low-quality cement supplier. That meant Ned did. Or maybe he was deceived too. Artie didn't look like a criminal, but appearances could be deceiving. Clive approached another hangar, stood on tiptoe, and peered through the window. It was empty inside. Clive understood everything. The foreman was secretly transporting the good cement somewhere at night and replacing it with the cheap stuff. Don was helping him. The illegal workers were there so they could be intimidated and silenced if they saw anything. That's why they only let the trusted, long-term workers load the trucks, those who wouldn't spill the beans. Did Ned know about this scheme? Clive needed to tell him immediately. They were both in serious trouble. Artie might wriggle out of it, but he and Ned were responsible for the construction quality. "What are you doing here?" Clive heard a guard's voice behind him. He ran towards the gates. The guard chased after him, shouting. 3 more guards appeared at the gates. They drew their pistols and started shooting at Clive. He managed to take cover around a corner. Bullets whizzed past. "No shooting." Don's raspy voice reached him. "We don't need the police here." The armed guards started to surround Clive. Realizing his escape route was cut off, he dashed for the fence and was almost under it when someone grabbed his legs and pulled him back. Several large guards pinned him down and started punching his ribs. Clive gasped for air, trying to scream, but a gag was shoved into his mouth. "Hold him, boys." Don, out of breath, leaned over Clive. "Jaleel, what are you doing here?" "He ratted us out to the boss," said the guard who had spotted Clive at the hangar. "I saw him snooping around the warehouse. We tried to play nice, and this is how he repays us." Don said angrily. "Get rid of him." "Completely," the guard clarified. "Completely." Clive knew what that meant. He roared loudly, ignoring the gag in his mouth. Blows rained down on his head, and a heavy boot stomped on his chest. He was being beaten by 3 men. One held him down while the other 2 kicked him. Don had already left, hurrying back to the trailer to report to Artie. Clive's ears were ringing. He tried to protect himself from the blows with his hands, but it was futile. Another blow to the face knocked him unconscious. In a half-dream state, he realized he was being dragged across the ground, held by his arms, and loaded into a trunk. They drove for a long time on a rough road. Then there was a bright light, a flash, and darkness again. Clive felt the cold and the warm, sticky blood from his broken nose running down his face. Breathing was painful, opening his eyes was painful. He closed them and realized he was lying on his back in a dusty roadside ditch. This was his last moment of consciousness. Clive blacked out, managing to think about his parents. "Mom, Dad, forgive me. I'm coming to you." He saw his grandmother Macy. She was sitting on her bed in her usual hunched position, shaking her head at him. "You fool, oh, you fool. Just like your mother." He saw his mother, Rhoda. She was young and rosy-cheeked, stroking Clive's head and saying, "Why can't you sit still like everyone else? You're always getting into something." He saw his father, deathly pale and tired. He sat next to Clive in his car, shaking his head. "So much money. The most important thing is to be honest." Clive woke up from sharp, searing pain. Someone had set his broken nose. He howled in pain. A strange female voice sounded somewhere in the hazy light. "Hold on, don't scream, it's done." Clive blinked rapidly. The outlines of a room began to take shape around him. His nose still hurt, but the cold compress provided some relief. Clive tried to sit up, groaned from the stabbing pain in his right side, and fell back down. The old bed beneath him creaked. The stranger gave Clive a disapproving look. "Lie still. You have a broken rib." Maybe more than one. Who are you? Clive whispered. The woman gently gave him water from an old cracked mug without a handle. She spoke sternly. I'm Hope. Hope. Clive smiled blissfully. Am I dead, Hope? Are you an angel? Instead of answering, she pressed on his swollen rib. Clive groaned, biting his lip. Tears welled up in his eyes. Does it hurt? Hope asked. Then you're not dead. There, the rib is set. I'll bandage you up now. Just stay put, okay? Clive obediently relaxed and closed his eyes. He felt the thick branch being tied to his right side, smelling of damp wood, and the cool night air drifting in through the open window. In the morning, Clive was awakened by the touch of a damp cloth on his forehead. He opened his eyes and saw Hope sitting on the bed, her freckled face smiling at him. You're alive. Alive. What are you doing? Morning routine. Trying to bring your temperature down. I felt your forehead last night, and it was hot. And now? It's better. Do you feel better? Hope asked. Clive tried to sit up. His right side still ached, his nose was swollen and sore, and his left thigh hurt. Well, I can live with it. He asked for another pillow to prop up his head, but Hope just shrugged. There isn't another one, just this. How come? Clive was surprised. Look around you. Clive glanced around the room where he had been unconscious for the past 2 days. Large chunks of plaster had fallen from the ceiling and walls, revealing rotten boards. In the corner, near the doorway without doors, a small tree was growing up through the floorboards. Seeing it, Clive gasped and quickly looked at Hope. She was wearing a dirty tracksuit, torn sneakers, and her hair was tangled and dirty. Are you an alcoholic or something? Clive asked. And you? Hope retorted, you look more like a drunk. You've got a big bruise under your eye. Maybe you tried to steal something from a store and got caught. Did I guess right? Clive sighed. He was in no position to criticize his savior's appearance. How did I end up here? He asked. How? Hope sat on the windowsill. A car stopped by the fence. 3 guys got out, pulled you from the trunk, dumped you in the ditch, and drove off. At first, I didn't want to approach, I was scared, but you were moaning so much. I was moaning. Clive felt embarrassed. Like a tennis player. Want me to demonstrate? Hope took a deep breath, but Clive stopped her. And what are you doing here? Do you live here? Are you stupid? Hope laughed, showing white teeth. How can anyone live here? I'm hiding. Is your husband abusive? Hope stopped laughing. Her face turned serious. She stood up silently and said she would go to the neighbors to ask for some food. A few minutes later, she returned with a small pot of soup. She took 2 spoons out of her hoodie pocket, then took off her hoodie, remaining in a tank top. She placed the hoodie under Clive's head to prop him up a bit and started feeding him with a spoon. Clive still knew nothing about Hope, so while chewing, he asked her to tell him about herself. She weakly smiled with pale lips. There's nothing to tell. And why would you care? What do you mean, why? Clive was surprised. We're spending the night under the same roof. I don't know anything about you either, except that you clearly have problems, Hope frowned. Clive understood. In her eyes, he looked suspicious, and the girl was clearly hiding from someone in this abandoned house and wasn't in the mood to be friendly with strangers. We're alike, he said, looking her straight in the eyes. Someone wanted to get rid of me, and now I probably can't trust people, just like you. You don't trust me? Well, Clive hesitated, what if you're in cahoots with the people who beat me up? Keeping an eye on me so I don't escape. And that's why I'm treating you. Hope smirked. Dragging you through the dirt to kill you? What's your name? You haven't introduced yourself. And you haven't thanked me for taking care of you. I saved your life. Thank you, Clive said sincerely. Thank you for everything. My name is Clive Turner. Maybe you've heard of me? No, Hope shook her head. Clive quickly explained why the construction site guards beat him up and left him to die near the nearest village. They probably thought no one lived here, Hope mused. And in truth, no one does. It's just me and Betty in the house across the road. She's been living here since the village was founded, doesn't want to leave. She keeps her house in order. But she can't seem to tackle the overgrowth along the fence. Because of that, the house looks a bit abandoned. And why are you here? Clive asked, perking up. Hope tensed. Clive noticed a shadow pass across her face. She quickly finished the remaining soup and went to Betty's house to return the dishes. When Hope returned, Clive was already asleep. He was dreaming again about his parents and grandmother, dreaming of the old house in the village that bore an eerie resemblance to the one he had accidentally found himself in. Grandma Macy had transformed into Hope, and with the same reproachful tone, she said to him, "Well, you fool, you nearly died." Clive woke up. Hope's voice was still echoing, but now it came from the next room. "I'm fine, don't worry," she was saying to someone, apparently on the phone. "Okay. I'll call tomorrow. I don't want to wake him. Bye." Clive closed his eyes and pretended to be asleep. Hope tiptoed across the creaky floorboards, approached the bed, and tucked his phone under his pillow. That was how she had been calling. Clive suddenly opened his eyes. Hope jumped back in surprise. "Not sleeping? Did I wake you? Who were you talking to?" Clive asked. "My friend." "Why from my phone? Don't you have your own?" Hope gave him a guilty smile, walked over to the bed, and sat on the edge. She brushed her damp hair, which smelled like shampoo, behind her ears and said she wanted to confess something. Clive tensed. After everything that had happened to him over the past few days, he wouldn't have been surprised to find out that Hope was in league with Artie and Don. But he was in for a different surprise. Hope whispered, almost inaudibly. "I escaped from slavery." "What?" Clive smiled, thinking she was joking. "I escaped from slavery. What part of that is unclear? I'm hiding here now so they don't find me and kill me. I think they might kill me. God, what if they've tracked me down and are sitting somewhere out there, waiting for the right moment?" "Calm down," Clive said. "Sit down and tell me more. What kind of slavery? Are you serious?" Hope took off her sneakers, got comfortable. She was born in a small village not far from there. Her parents lived there all their lives, leaving behind a small house and a shed, where they kept chickens, geese, and ducks. Her mother worked as a teacher in the local school, while her father went to the city for work and managed the farm in the summer, raising pigs and selling meat. They lived modestly but not poorly. For her graduation, Hope was bought a beautiful dress. She was the most stunning graduate that year, and all the girls envied her. Her personal life didn't flourish because she was always more focused on earning a living than on relationships. That's how her mother had raised her: first, learn to support yourself, and only then think about marriage to avoid accidentally meeting a tyrant. After graduation, Hope started traveling to a nearby town to finish college. She would leave in the morning and return in the afternoon. She still tried to help her mother around the house but began to notice that her mother had changed. She was eating less and looked tired. Hope told her father about it, and he noticed something was off too. Their mother insisted until the last moment that she was fine and refused to go to the hospital, but under her husband's pressure, she finally relented. Early one morning, Hope left with her mother for the nearby town. After lunch, when she met her outside the college, her mother revealed that she had been diagnosed with a tumor. This news shocked Hope. At first, she refused to believe her mother was ill, repeatedly taking her to doctors. But time and again, the doctors confirmed the diagnosis. Surgery was necessary. Her father gathered the needed funds, he withdrew some from their accounts, sold the car, and borrowed the rest. Hope's mother underwent surgery, but it didn't help her. The doctors found metastases. They eased her pain as best they could, but they offered no hope. The once vibrant woman transformed into a walking skeleton with a bare skull in just a few months. At night, Hope cried from the fear of losing her mother and the sense of hopelessness. She and her father took turns sitting by her bedside. Hope dropped out of college. On one February night, Hope's mother passed away. She and her father cried beside her body until morning. They buried her beautifully. Many people attended the funeral and the wake: teachers from the school where her mother worked, former and current students, their parents, and just acquaintances and neighbors. Hope's father held himself together admirably, thanking everyone for their support and working hard to settle debts. But he also began to noticeably weaken. Hope grew worried. She didn't want to lose her father; after all, he was all she had left. When a tumor was discovered in her father's brain during his annual checkup, Hope laughed loudly for a few minutes before bursting into tears. Her greatest fear had come true. She decided she would not allow illness to take her father from her so easily. She accompanied him to hospitals, where they quoted an outrageous sum for treatment. She had no idea where to find such money. Her father was defeated, repeating, "Don't, sweetheart, don't, Hope." He understood that his chances of survival were practically non-existent. All the doctors were honest about it. He only wanted to ease his daughter's life and not cause her too much trouble, especially since she had already put her life on hold to care for her sick mother for over a year. He wanted Hope to attend college, find a good job, and be able to support herself after he was gone. After his wife's death, he had almost no savings left. Everything had gone toward medical bills and the funeral. Hope had other plans. She intended to spend all the remaining family money to save her father. So, she took out loans in her father's name, using their house as collateral. The plan failed. Her father died on the operating table. His funeral felt like a haze for Hope. The same familiar faces that had come to say goodbye to her mother were there again. The scent of incense filled the air. Her father's bloodless face lay in the coffin. On the third day after the funeral, collectors arrived and began to seize their possessions. Hope came to her senses. She couldn't save her father, but now she needed to save herself. She had no way to pay off the loans. She was unemployed. The bank refused to declare her father bankrupt, as she had turned 18 by then and was capable of working to repay the debt. Hope started looking for a job. First, she tried working as a sales clerk in a store, but after only a couple of days, a group of drunken customers came in and shattered half the displays. Hope decided to search for work in the city, and she found it. She needed to bottle perfume. Hope knew she was involved in something illegal, as the perfumes were clearly knockoffs of expensive brands. The workshop was located in the basement of an abandoned factory. But the pay was good, almost enough to cover her monthly loan payments. Most of her salary went toward transportation. Hope traveled back and forth to the village every day. She couldn't leave the house because of the livestock, and she needed somewhere to live. Besides, the house was the only remnant of her carefree life, the only living memory of her parents. Hope was determined to preserve it at all costs. But circumstances forced her to make the difficult decision to leave the village and sell her house. She couldn't sell it officially because of the mortgage, so she made a verbal agreement with an old acquaintance of her father's. This man had recently divorced and wanted to keep the house he shared with his ex-wife for their children while finding a new place for himself. He promised to live in Hope's house, maintain it, and pay her a fixed monthly sum. With that money, Hope found a room in the city, not far from the factory. Slowly, life began to improve. The loan amount decreased with each passing day. Hope dreamed of returning to the village after paying off her debt. She didn't like city life at all. There was constant rush, the noise of traffic outside, chaos, and the presence of angry, tired people everywhere. However, the man living in her house had other plans. He started regularly bringing home mistresses, often married women from the area. One day, one of the betrayed husbands sought revenge and set fire to the porch. The man living in Hope's house and his lover managed to escape through a window, but the house itself was lost. When Hope was awakened at 3 in the morning by a neighbor's phone call, she arrived in the village to find only ashes and a handful of sympathetic acquaintances. The neighbor who called her, Kayla, felt the worst for her. Having long buried her husband and unable to have children, Kayla took it upon herself to look after Hope after her father's funeral, considering her like a granddaughter. She offered Hope shelter while the investigations were ongoing. Police and bank representatives arrived to assess the damage and interview witnesses. The man who lived in her house and his mistress, along with her husband, vanished after the incident. They were likely hiding, fearing repercussions. The arson was officially recorded, but no one believed Hope when she insisted that she hadn't set her own house on fire. The girl just wanted to play the fool. She set fire to the place to collect compensation and avoid paying the loan. "Am I right?" sneered the bank representative. "I see cases of deliberate arson 100 times a day." Hope faced the possibility of criminal charges for fraud. By some miracle, she managed to avoid it. The husband of that woman came forward, confessed, and was sentenced. He was ordered to pay off the entire loan amount, despite everything. Hope returned to the perfume bottling factory. The manager, an elderly man with a gray beard, expressed his outrage at her absence. He didn't consider her burned house and legal troubles to be valid reasons for not working. He agreed to take Hope back, but only on the condition that she would work the night shift for free to make up for her absence. Hope found herself working non-stop. By the end of the day, her back ached, and her eyes watered from the fumes of alcohol, but she endured the daily torture with resilience. She had nowhere else to go. Aside from Kayla, no one in the village cared about her fate anymore. She could have lived with Kayla, but there was no work in the village, and the bank loan remained. Kayla called Hope on weekends to check on her health and well-being, but soon she passed away too. Hope's life became a monotonous cycle, like a Groundhog Day. Early mornings, days on her feet, constant shouts from her boss, meager lunches and dinners, quick naps, and back to work again. She only caught up on sleep on her one day off. She began to think about looking for a new job and started studying job listings. The manager must have caught wind of this. He threatened her with consequences if she dared to betray his trust and quit before working off her debt. Hope realized she was in deep trouble. She had gotten involved with some criminals. During her shift, Fiona worked alongside Hope. They became friends, often chatting while standing opposite each other and going for tea during their breaks. Fiona had a history of drug addiction, something Hope was aware of. She worked there because she had a criminal record, which made it hard for her to find employment elsewhere. This shared struggle is what brought them closer together, as Hope also carried the burden of a tarnished reputation due to her ongoing legal troubles and debts. One day, Fiona confided in her that she desperately wanted to leave. Her parents, who had previously abandoned her, had found her and offered to take her back home. But Fiona couldn't leave. Her boss had confiscated her ID. Hope was horrified. How can that be? Determined to help her friend, Hope decided to confront the boss about her own resignation. She threatened to report him to the police for the illegal activities he was involved in, including making counterfeit products and holding people hostage. He merely laughed in response, ordered the guards to beat Hope, and to lock Fiona in one of the back rooms. "If you don't bring me your passport by tomorrow," he said, signaling for the guards to stop, "your friend will be feeding the fish, understand?" Hope was thrown out of the building. Once home, she was at a loss for what to do. Should she go to the police, contact Fiona's parents, or run away? The first two options were immediately dismissed. She didn't know her parents' address or names. As for the police, they laughed at her. "What factory? What girl? Are you drunk?" "I'm not joking," Hope shrieked into the phone. "Someone is being held hostage." "Miss, stop joking around," the officer replied before hanging up. Her conscience wouldn't let her run away. After all, Fiona was her only friend following Kayla's death. Hope grabbed her passport and returned to the factory. There, her passport was taken from her, tossed into a safe, and she was told to get back to work. Fiona was already standing by the machine, half of her face bruised. They couldn't talk as a guard was watching them. When the shift ended and Hope began to leave, he blocked her path. "Where do you think you're going?" "Home," Hope shrugged. "Your home is here," the guard sneered. "I'm not allowed to let you go." He grabbed her by the elbow and brought her to a cramped room with barred windows, where a mattress lay on the floor and Fiona was sitting on it. "Good night," the guard laughed as he locked the door behind them. Hope sat beside her friend and hugged her, but Fiona pulled away. "Why did you do that? Are you insane?" Fiona asked, her voice laced with anger. Hope was taken aback. "What did I do? I came to rescue you. Did I ask you to do that?" Fiona snapped. "I got beaten up because of you. I got beaten up too. If you just stayed still, no one would have hit anyone," Fiona yelled, turning away on the mattress. The next morning, they were awakened, fed tasteless porridge, and sent to work. Throughout the day, they didn't exchange a single word. In the evening, Fiona was taken away somewhere, and Hope never saw her again. She worked alone, desperately trying to break the bars to escape, but it was futile. There was no one to ask for help, the building was isolated from the road and neighboring houses. The opportunity to escape came recently. Hope was cautious and quiet, and her boss had let his guard down. They stopped accompanying her to the restroom. During one of those trips, she managed to flee by simply turning the wrong way. She ran down the corridor for a long time, then up the stairs, stumbling on every step. She was terrified of running into a guard at the top and getting caught, but there were no guards in sight. She burst out of the factory grounds and hid in the forest. It was only after that she heard distant shouts behind her. "Catch her!" "Where did she go?" "You go that way, and you two go over there." Hope had never run so fast in her life. She dashed through the forest, trying to keep moving east, remembering that there was a small village somewhere in that direction. She reached the village in the evening, feeling an overwhelming fatigue in every part of her body. She collapsed on the ground near what looked like an abandoned house to catch her breath and heard an old woman's voice above her. "Who are you?" Hope asked the woman, Betty, to hide her. She was waiting for her boss to come to the village with reinforcements, but they never arrived. Apparently, they didn't know about this village or simply ran slower. She told Betty what had happened, and the old woman shook her head in disbelief. "Oh my goodness! Are you telling the truth? I swear, I'm not lying. Please don't turn me in. I don't have my passport." "Poor girl," Betty said. "Are you hungry? Would you like something to eat?" From then on, Betty fed Hope. To avoid putting the old woman in danger if the criminals came looking for her, Hope moved to a neighboring dilapidated house. That's where she lived, visiting Betty occasionally. At night, she couldn't sleep, sitting by the window and listening for every little noise. About a week ago, she heard an engine. Panic set in as she feared it was her pursuers. She saw a car through the window. Men got out, unloaded Clive from the trunk, and drove away. As for what happened next, he already knew. Clive listened to Hope, breathless. He never realized how much deceit and evil existed around him until he experienced it firsthand. After hearing Hope's story, he understood that evil had always been there. People like Artie had always been around, ready to kill for money. Clive just hadn't crossed paths with them until he turned 30 by sheer luck. When Hope finished recounting her life and looked at Clive, waiting for a reaction, all he could say was, "I'm sorry." "Oh, please, don't pity me," Hope sighed, wiping her tears away. "It's my fault." "Fault for what?" "For acting like a fool. For going to that factory." You were just doing what you could. That's admirable. Clive smiled. Hope looked at him intently. Do you really think so? Clive nodded. Well then, I'll feed you today. I'll go visit Betty. She doesn't know about you, so stay hidden, okay? Hope left and returned with a bowl of food. They ate together. Afterward, Hope washed the dishes and brought them back to her neighbor. Then she dragged an old, unupholstered armchair from another room and curled up in it. I'm going to sleep here tonight. Is that okay? There's a leak in the ceiling in that room. You've been sleeping like this the whole time? Clive exclaimed. Lie down at the edge, I'll move over. No, Hope blushed. I'd rather stay like this, sitting. That won't do. Clive sighed, pulled out his phone from under the pillow, and saw that it was almost dead. I'm going to call someone. They'll come for us and take us to my home. Aren't you afraid to go back? What is there to be afraid of? No one knows I was the one who got beaten up. I was pretending to be a worker. Clive opened his modest list of saved contacts. He found the number of the driver who used to take him around the city before he partnered with Ned. After the merger, the driver quit because he didn't like Ned. He found him too pretentious and too concerned with what others thought. The driver didn't answer right away. Yes. Hey, Derek, old friend. It's Clive. Clive? I'm in trouble, Clive replied shortly. Can you pick me up? I'll give you the address now. The call was cut short as Clive's phone died. Now all they could do was wait and hope that Derek would come all this way for his former boss. Dusk was settling in, and the stifling July heat lingered. Birds chattered loudly atop the trees. Clive dozed off, and Hope soon followed, falling asleep in her chair. They both woke to the sound of a car door slamming shut. The noise was sharp and jarring. Then a rough male voice called out. Clive! Clive, are you here? Hope, startled, jumped to the window and peeked out from behind the curtain. There's a man. Bald, big, with a neck tattoo. Is that Derek? She asked quietly. Yes, Clive replied, struggling to get up from the bed. Bring him here. I can't get up on my own. Hope went outside, and a minute later, Derek entered the room, looking around in astonishment. When he saw Clive, he rushed over, examined him, and asked. Who beat you up like this? Well, Clive hesitated, the foreman at the construction site. I found out something I wasn't supposed to. I see. What's your plan? You need to go to the hospital. Derek helped Clive out of bed, steadying him as he leaned on his shoulder. I can't go to the hospital, Clive winced. No one knows it was me who got beaten. If they find out, there will be trouble. I need to go home and rest. And then? Then I'll deal with all of this. Who's she? Derek nodded toward Hope. Who am I? She replied sarcastically. A woman. A person. I saved your Clive from death, by the way. They approached the car. Betty, who was getting ready for bed, heard the car pull up to Hope's house and came out to see what was happening. When she saw Derek, Clive, and Hope, she gasped, clutching her heart, and ran over to them. Hope. Hope. What's going on? Everything is fine. Hope reassured her, helping Derek lay Clive in the back seat of the SUV. Then she hugged the old woman tightly. We're leaving. Thank you for everything. If anyone comes here asking about us, don't say anything, okay? They might hurt you if they know you helped us. Oh my goodness, Betty said. Take care of yourself, Hope. As the car drove away from the village, Betty stood on the road, watching them go. For a moment, Hope felt like she was a child again, when her mother or father would stand by the gate for a long time, watching her leave. She settled comfortably in the front seat and fell asleep. Derek and Clive were silent. Derek had many questions for his former boss, but he hesitated to ask them in Hope's presence. He did ask one thing, smiling slightly. Why did you call me? Do you trust me? We've known each other forever, Clive lied, but after a moment, he added, I can't trust Ned right now. Or anyone associated with him. I told you, Derek laughed. I told you that sooner or later that scumbag would show his true colors. No wonder I didn't like him. Yeah, Clive muttered, I'm sorry I didn't listen. I was an idiot. It's okay, Derek waved it off. Get some sleep, it's a long drive. At Clive's house, Derek carefully pulled up, dimming the headlights and scanning the area for any signs of surveillance. Only then did he wake Hope and help Clive out of the car. Derek guided Clive to the elevator and helped him unlock the apartment door with a fingerprint. Once inside, Derek settled Clive on the couch, turned on the lights, and peeked into the fridge, whistling. This place is fully stocked. Hope, are you hungry? Want something to eat? Yes, Hope replied. Let me wash my hands first. Where's the bathroom? White door to the right, Clive called from the couch. Hope walked through the apartment, amazed by its high ceilings, huge rooms, and floor-to-ceiling windows. It was like something out of a magazine. The bathroom was not only spacious but also had a bouquet of fresh flowers on a table by the sink. She was in awe. She skeptically examined herself in the mirror. Her hair was a mess, and her clothes were dirty and wrinkled. She didn't want to sit in such a state with two men in a luxurious living room. Hope took off her clothes, threw them into the washing machine, but, unable to figure out how it worked, just closed the door and turned on the shower. As the hot water hit her head, Hope smiled with delight. How long had it been since she'd had a hot shower? A month? 2. Since she and Fiona had been locked in that little room. Thoughts of her friend wiped the smile from her face. Where was she now? What had happened to her? Was she released, or? Hope didn't want to think about it. Otherwise, it would mean she was responsible for her death. For everything that had happened. After her shower, Hope brushed her teeth with one of the many toothbrushes on the shelf. She put on one of the fluffy white robes from the hanger and returned barefoot to the living room, where Clive was already sitting at the table, slightly grimacing. Derek was dressing his wounds. Instead of makeshift bandages and old rags, there were elastic bandages and a proper brace. I had a feeling. Derek laughed. I stopped by the pharmacy on the way. Told them I needed everything for a seriously injured person. They gave me plaster, bandages, and painkillers. Now we'll test everything on you. Hope walked past them, poured herself a glass of water, and sat at the table. Derek and Clive fell silent, staring at her in amazement. Who are you? Derek asked after a moment of silence. What goddess has descended into our humble abode? You were saying something different a few hours ago, Hope replied. I just took a shower. Well, I won't be calling you an alcoholic now. Oh, you called her that? Derek feigned shock. My God, Clive, you still don't know how to treat women. Nothing's changed all these years. He finished tending to Clive, took ribs and potatoes out of the microwave, prepared by Penny, who had been regularly coming to Clive's place to clean and stock the fridge with food, often throwing out uneaten leftovers. Clive frequently got caught up in work and forgot to eat. Hope eagerly dug into the ribs. She had been eating poorly during the days with Clive, as most of the food Betty gave her went to Clive. Derek fetched a bottle of wine from the fridge, took 3 glasses from the cabinet, poured the wine, and raised his glass. I don't know how you two met or what happened, but Clive, I'm glad you're alive and almost well. Let's drink to that. Hope raised her glass and clinked it with Derek's. Cheers. Will you tell us about the foreman who beat you up? Derek asked Clive. He took a sip of wine and began telling Derek how he had come to scout the place after receiving an anonymous call. He arrived, completely unaware of Ned and everyone else being involved in some serious crime. He had come to break up his dull routine, to shake things up, and to stop thinking about age and loneliness. And in the end, he almost died. Derek listened attentively to Clive, sipping his wine, then turned to Hope. "So, why were you hiding in that abandoned house? You have problems too." "I escaped from slavery," Hope said, slightly tipsy. "And I did good." "Go to sleep, then." "Good job," Clive smiled. "You've eaten enough, right?" "I've eaten," Hope nodded. "I hope I won't be sleeping in a chair tonight, right? Do you see that archway?" Clive pointed to the opening behind Hope. "That leads to the bedroom. The whole bed is at your disposal." Hope stood up from the table, thanked Derek for dinner, and headed to the bedroom. Compared to the rest of the apartment, the bedroom was quite modest. There was a high double bed, 2 nightstands, lamps, and a separate toilet. Hope crawled under the heavy blanket, still in her robe, and quickly fell asleep. She dreamt of her childhood home. Derek and Clive sat in the kitchen for a long time that evening, discussing what to do next. It was clear that Artie was involved in shady dealings behind Clive's back, but Ned's role in these affairs was still in question. They needed to find out who was behind all the material reselling, assess the extent of the situation, and only then take action. "If I were you, I'd focus on your health right now. Once your ribs heal, you can expose this whole operation," Derek advised. "I think so too," Clive replied. "And I need to figure things out with Hope. She's good." Derek smirked. "You like her?" "As far as I know, she's not in a relationship. You might want to try your luck." "What are you talking about?" Derek laughed, pointing to the wedding ring on his finger that Clive hadn't noticed before. "I got married. To Victoria, your secretary. Remember her?" "No way," Clive grinned. "Oh, you've really fallen behind while dealing with Ned. You need to catch up. We're finishing up the country house now. Once it's done, I'll invite you for the housewarming. And bring your Hope along." "She's not mine," Clive replied, slightly flustered. "She's just a good girl." "Exactly the kind of girl you've been looking for your whole life," Derek winked. "Anyway, I should get going. My wife is probably waiting for me." He shook Clive's hand firmly. "Don't disappear again." Once Derek left and closed the door, Clive cautiously got up from the table and returned to the couch. It was a bit hard to sleep on, but he had no choice. Hope was sleeping in the bed. He tossed and turned for a bit before finally falling asleep. In the morning, he woke up early. He took the pills Derek had brought yesterday, washed his face, and looked in the mirror. He decided he had gotten off easy. His nose was swollen, 3 times its normal size, but his skull and eyes seemed fine. He remembered that Penny was supposed to come soon. He called her. "Penny, good morning. I'm calling to let you know you don't need to come today." "No, nothing happened. It's just that Clive hesitated, searching for a good reason. "I'm just with a girl." "Yes, thanks. Have a good day." At that moment, Penny was packing her kit with cleaning supplies in the office. She put her phone away in her pocket and smiled. Finally, that guy had found someone and wouldn't be wallowing in loneliness anymore. After the call, Clive decided to take a shower. He hadn't had time for it yesterday. He stripped off his clothes, tossing them into the trash bin. As he examined his body, he noticed bloodstains and bruises he hadn't even realized he had. He turned on the water, leaned his head down, and peered closely at the drain. A few strands of red hair were stuck there. Clive grimaced. Hope clearly wasn't used to cleaning up after herself after a shower. After his shower, he put on a robe and slippers and noticed some items in the washing machine. Must be Hope's, Clive thought. He poured detergent into the compartment, set the desired cycle, and headed to the kitchen to make himself a cup of coffee. He leisurely sipped it, looking out at the morning city skyline through the window. Then he lay down to rest. Half awake, he heard the washing machine beep. The cycle had finished. He got up, pulled Hope's clothes out of the machine, and tossed them into the dryer. While they dried, he shaved, washed his face, and brushed his teeth. Now he felt a bit better, clean and comfortable in his robe. Even his ribs seemed to hurt less, although he still couldn't take a deep breath. He took the clothes out of the dryer and placed them in a folding basin usually used by Penny. Wondering where to put them, he decided to bring it straight to Hope, especially since at the top of the pile, like the cherry on a cake, lay a pink lace bra. He entered the bedroom with the basin in hand. Hope was still asleep, buried under a jumble of crumpled blankets and pillows. Only one leg and part of her face were visible. Occasionally, she let out a soft snore. Clive stared at her in amazement. Sure, he had spent the night with girls before and had seen them sleeping in the morning, but this was something new. There was no trace of grace or tenderness. Suddenly, he remembered that his father used to look just the same when he took a daytime nap. He chuckled to himself. Hope woke up, saw Clive with the basin, and then noticed her underwear. She shot up, adjusting her robe, and snatched the basin from his hands. "Are you some kind of pervert?" "Me?" Clive replied, surprised. "Yeah, do you like watching people sleep?" "Actually, yes," he smiled, "but I didn't enjoy watching you snore." "I do. And there's drool," he said, touching his right cheek, "right here." Hope blushed, dumped the basin of clothes onto the unmade bed, handed it back to Clive, and declared. "Here, just go away. This is my house, you know." Clive stepped out of the room. Hope closed the door behind him. After a moment, she thought better of it, opened the door, and shouted after him. "I'm not dressed." She put on her freshly washed clothes, neatly made the bed, trying to restore it to its original state. She folded the robe and placed it on top. Satisfied with how the room looked, she left for the kitchen, where Clive was frying eggs. "Want some?" he asked Hope. "No, thanks," she retorted sarcastically, "I think I'll just leave your house." She emphasized the word house deliberately. Clive didn't catch her hint and shrugged. "Go ahead. Do you have somewhere to go?" Hope felt a surge of quiet anger. "I'll find somewhere to go." "I'd go to the police if I were you," Clive replied, turning off the stove. "Well, I'm going to have breakfast." He ate his fried eggs in silence, washing them down with orange juice and toast. Hope leaned against the wall, watching him. She felt her appetite stirring, and her stomach let out a growl, betraying her. Clive heard it and turned to her. "Are you just going to stand there?" "Yep. Sit down and eat. There's plenty of food in the fridge." Hope approached the refrigerator and opened the door. She found a container of risotto and put it in the microwave to heat up. Then she sat across from Clive, who was finishing his breakfast. She started to eat carefully. He looked at her with a hint of mockery. "Just eat normally. I've seen how you eat when you're really hungry." "I'm not hungry," Hope replied. "By the way, I made the bed and cleaned there, so you don't have to worry." "And I'm not worried. I'll invite Penny, my housekeeper, she'll take care of it." Hope flushed with anger and stood up from the table, pushing her chair back sharply. "Stop mocking me." "How am I mocking you?" Clive asked, genuinely surprised. "You flaunt your wealth like it makes you better, as if I'm second-rate." "What nonsense." Clive frowned. "It's not nonsense. I don't like you, you're a lousy person. I shouldn't have pulled you out of that gutter, you should have stayed there." Clive was taken aback. Hope realized her mistake and said quietly. "I'm sorry, that's not what I meant." "No, it is." Clive wiped his mouth with a napkin and stood up from the table. "You know what I think? I think you're jealous of me." "Jealous?" Hope bristled again. "Yeah. I wasn't born wealthy. I earned everything by working hard. And you've worked, but all you've gained is a pile of problems." "I was trying to save my father," Hope interrupted him. You said you respected me for that. What does it matter what I said if you don't believe it? Clive replied. You think of yourself as second-rate, and I don't know why. Hope fell silent, her lip trembling. That's not true, she said quietly. It is true. You know, Clive frowned as he stood up from the table, I'm tired. I'm going to lie down. Enjoy your meal. Hope watched him go, confused. Clive lay down. She finished her meal, washed the dishes for herself and Clive, and wiped the table. Approaching the couch where he lay, she noticed his eyes were open. She sat in the chair opposite him and said, I'm sorry. I'm not mad at you, I'm mad at myself, my boss, and a little at Fiona. Okay, Clive turned to face her, what are you going to do next? What do you mean? You need to get your passport renewed or get your old one back, punish that jerk from the workshop and declare bankruptcy. Oh. Hope smiled, that story is never ending. I give up. I'll get my passport renewed, of course. And then I'll go somewhere far away, where no one knows me and no one can find me. Clive thought for a moment. Do you want me to help you with the passport? How? I'll invite a lawyer. He'll come and sort everything out. You'll get your passport back in less than a week. Hope's eyes lit up. I want to. Clive quietly chuckled, trying not to aggravate his sore rib. He dialed the number of the lawyer, Stephen, with whom he had worked since the company was founded. A girl has lost her passport. We need to get it renewed, preferably quickly. Stephen listened to Clive and promised to come by around noon. Clive warned Hope that he wouldn't be in the room during their meeting with the lawyer, as he didn't want to show anyone his broken nose and rib. Hope agreed. She started tidying up, humming to herself. Clive lay down in the bedroom to take a nap, covering himself with a blanket. Before closing his eyes, he spotted a red hair on the pillow and smiled. She didn't clean up well. Stephen arrived at 1 o'clock, bringing coffee and croissants that Clive loved. He was surprised to see Hope open the door for him. Good afternoon. Is Clive home? Clive isn't here, but you don't need him, Hope smiled, taking the guest by the arm and leading him into the apartment. Stephen gently extricated himself from her grip and asked. Are you the new cleaner? Where's Penny? Well, I'm not a cleaner, she huffed. Sorry, who are you then? Just Hope. Hope. Yeah. Are you Clive's girlfriend? Hope blushed. Just a friend. Got it, Stephen smiled. Is it about your passport issues? Let's sit down, and I'll explain everything. Stephen settled into a chair and started asking Hope questions while filling out a form. When he got to the reason for the passport loss, Hope hesitated. I don't know where I lost it. How is that possible? You don't remember at all? No. That's unfortunate, Stephen sighed. The agency will look for the lost passport before issuing a new one. The process will take a lot of time if you can't remember where you lost it. It was taken from me, Hope confessed, swallowing hard as memories of the dark workshop flooded back. Stephen frowned. Took it? Who? The people I was working for. Stephen now turned red. Sorry, he cleared his throat. I hate to ask such questions, but I need to know. Are you a prostitute? What? Hope jumped to her feet. What are you talking about? Sorry, Stephen said, embarrassed. So, you're not? Of course not. What were you doing there, working for those people? Hope perched on the edge of the chair, staring at the floor. I was pouring counterfeit perfumes. Stephen chuckled. Hope turned even redder with shame. He removed his glasses from his thin nose and rubbed his brow. Yes, interesting situation. Is Clive aware of this? He knows. All right, Stephen put his glasses back on and clapped his knees. I understand everything now. I'll try to arrange a new passport for you today. You'll probably need to be present tomorrow. What time should I pick you up? I'll be home all day, Hope replied. Stephen smiled mysteriously. So, at home. Good. I have to go now, I've got other matters. Goodbye, Hope. Again, I'm sorry for the tactless questions. She nodded and saw the lawyer to the door. Clive emerged from the room, holding his right side. Did Stephen come? What did he say? Will he get you a new passport? He said he'd pick me up tomorrow, Hope replied. Are you hungry? I want to make some soup. Do you want some? For the first time in a long while, he opened his laptop, settling comfortably on the couch. He looked over Ned's reports for the week and checked his email. There were no more anonymous calls or letters. He called Stephen. He said that the passport issue was nearly resolved. Clive smiled contentedly. Thanks, Stephen. When's the wedding? Stephen asked. Clive frowned. What do you mean? Aren't you restoring Hope's passport to apply for a marriage license? Clive laughed nervously, glancing at Hope, who was busy at the stove. No, of course not. What nonsense. All right, I have to go. Stephen hung up. Clive stared at his phone screen for a while. What kind of question is that? What wedding? He put his phone down and started watching Hope. Maybe she had said something about it. If he asked her, she'd just get upset again. Better to talk to Stephen later. Hope noticed Clive's gaze. Is something wrong? Why are you staring at me? Just looking. Can't I? Clive grumbled, returning to his work. Hope snorted. She liked Clive, but she couldn't even admit it to herself. Who was she, and who was he? Obviously, if she confessed to him, he'd laugh and kick her out. And then she'd be without a passport and money in a strange city. No way. For once in her life, she needed to try not to mess things up, not to scare away the shy luck that so rarely visited her. She poured the hot soup into bowls. Come on, it's time to eat, Hope called him, and Clive was at the table in an instant. He tied a napkin around his neck, wished Hope a good appetite and took a spoonful of soup, and froze. A warm feeling spread through his chest. It wasn't the soup, but the memory. His mother used to make exactly this soup when she was still alive. They used to huddle in their small kitchen together. Every time, Rhoda greeted her son with a delicious homemade dinner after work. It's good, he said. Hey, can you give me the recipe? There's no recipe, Hope laughed. I just threw everything I found in your fridge into the pot. Funny, only my late mother, Rhoda, made this kind of soup. Clive smiled. She passed away. I'm sorry, Hope set her spoon aside. You never talked about your family. Your mom is gone, what about your dad? Dad left even earlier. What did they do for a living? Hope asked after a moment's silence. My parents? Both worked at a factory all their lives. Mom worked in the confectionery section. Dad was in the machine building section. Then why did you, Hope hesitated, decide to go into business? Wanted to fulfill your parents' dreams? Clive remembered his mother's happy eyes during their trip to the seaside. Mom always dreamed of a seaside vacation. We went on holiday 10 years ago. See that photo? I took it there. And Dad dreamed of having his own new car. He saved his whole life but never bought it. I couldn't give it to him. That's why I became a businessman, to earn enough to buy Dad a car. Clive looked at his father's photo. You know, sometimes I ask myself, why do I need all this? I could buy 10 cars now, but why? I don't need them, and besides my parents, I have no one else. They finished the soup in silence. Hope cleared the table, put the kettle on, and turned to Clive, who was still sitting at the table, leaning against the high counter. We're similar, Clive. Really? He smirked. How so? We're both very lonely people. She smiled sadly, took some tea bags from the drawer. Clive watched her and thought. Yes, you're right. We're both lonely. After tea, he returned to his laptop and sent Hope to the store and the nearest pharmacy. He needed medicines and ointment for the swelling, and she really wanted to get out of the house and breathe some fresh air. The yard was deserted. Hope pulled her hood up so no one would recognize her, but after walking a few hundred meters, she took it off. Too hot. She quickly found the pharmacy. Hope bought the ointment, tablets, and syringes, paying with Clive's card. She took longer to find a grocery store. When she walked in, she was stunned by the prices. Ordinary bread cost a small fortune here. She had to remind herself that she wasn't in her village or even the small town where she had worked in a factory for a few years. She was with Clive. If he had sent her here, he knew what the prices were like. Unabashedly, she filled the basket with groceries. At the checkout, they packed everything into paper bags. A young guy in a branded t-shirt and cap appeared and asked cheerfully, "What's your apartment number? Where should I deliver these?" "Apartment 719, Hope replied automatically. The guy nodded, loaded the bags into a cart, and left the store. After paying, Hope shrugged and headed home but decided to take a little walk. It was a hot but pleasant day. A cool breeze was blowing, and the air was filled with the scent of flowers. Hope stopped by a playground. She lay on a net swing, closed her eyes, and lay there for a long time, letting the sun warm her face and breathing in the scent of summer. When Hope left, Clive immediately called Stephen to clarify why he had mentioned a wedding. Stephen just laughed. "Aren't you planning to get married?" "I've known this girl for a week," Clive replied. Stephen sighed. "So she lied about being a prostitute?" "She's not a prostitute," Clive snapped. "She's just an acquaintance." "And since when do you let your female acquaintances stay at your place for more than one night?" Stephen chuckled. "Listen, Clive, I know you. She's not just an acquaintance. She means something to you." "She saved my life," Clive said. "Now, that's a story I want to hear," Stephen said. Clive trusted his lawyer. He told him about his reconnaissance mission and how it ended, and how Hope had taken care of him for a few days. "I think you should have led with that before asking me to help restore her passport," Stephen noted. "Sorry," Clive said. "Don't you trust me?" "I do, of course. I was just choosing my words." Stephen was silent. "Alright, Stephen, really, I'm sorry." "Okay. So, do we have a problem? Will you take care of it?" "Of course. I'll look into it." Clive heard the sound of a door closing. "I have to go. Talk to you tomorrow." "Thanks, buddy." Later, a courier came, ringing the doorbell insistently, but Clive didn't answer. He didn't want to be seen in his current state, even by the courier. The courier waited a bit, left the packages at the door, and left. Hope came back an hour after the courier. "I took a walk around the neighborhood," she said, taking off her sweatshirt. "It's beautiful outside. Don't you want to go for a walk?" "Not right now," Clive traced a circle around his nose with his finger. "Did you bring the ointment?" Hope made a compress with the ointment for him. She unpacked the groceries. Clive watched her surreptitiously, tearing his eyes away from the monitor with estimates. He couldn't understand why he kept wanting to look at her. Hope felt his glances but attributed them to some mistake she had made. "He's mad," she thought. "What's wrong? Did I spend too much?" "Probably. Or is he upset about the courier? But I didn't know that's how things are done here. God, I can't wait to get my passport. This fear of being kicked out is driving me crazy." She wandered around the house aimlessly until evening. She found a bookshelf, picked out a few interesting books, and locked herself in the bedroom. She started reading one and didn't notice how the hours flew by. The only indication that a lot of time had passed was her stiff back and the bookmark halfway through the book. Clive called her from the kitchen. "Hope, What should we make for dinner? She put the book aside and went to the kitchen. Clive was standing by the open fridge, looking at the groceries. We could bake some fish. Or fry some steaks. Do you like steaks? Not really. What do you like? You cooked lunch, so dinner's on me. I love macaroni and cheese, Hope replied. Can you make that? Sure, Clive smiled. He sent Hope back to finish her book and started cooking. Standing at the stove, he suddenly laughed quietly so Hope wouldn't hear. Just think, macaroni and cheese. Other girls, when they stayed over, were skeptical about me cooking dinner for them. The last girl, when I offered to cook something for dinner, got up and left, saying, "You're so rich, but you're too cheap to take me to a restaurant. You're stingy, Clive. But here, macaroni and cheese. I'll have to take Hope out for dinner once my nose heals," Clive thought. 20 minutes later, they were sitting across from each other at the table, eating. Hope couldn't stop praising the meal. "Oh my God, this is delicious. You're a great cook." "Thanks," Clive laughed. "Usually, I get criticized." "No way. Girls don't like homemade food. They prefer expensive restaurants and lobsters." "You mean the ones with claws?" Hope wrinkled her nose. "Ew, they're scary. How can anyone eat them? They're tasty. Want to go try some when you get your new passport? We can celebrate." "Why not? By the way, how's your nose?" "It's fine. You know, I actually broke my nose once as a kid. Jumped from a tree and didn't land well." They talked for 3 hours. Outside, the hot July evening was slowly fading. Clive marveled at the feeling that he had known Hope for a long time. It was so easy and comfortable being around her. He turned off the air conditioner and opened the window. He helped Hope clean up and then sprawled on the couch. She brought a book from the bedroom and settled into an armchair. "What did you dream of becoming?" Clive suddenly asked. "When I was in school." Hope furrowed her brow. "I dreamed of being rich." Clive laughed. "Rich?" "Yes, so I wouldn't need anything, like you. That's why I tried to study hard. I wanted to get into a good college." "What about you? What did you want to be?" "Who knows? I didn't like studying. I liked making money. I guess, like you, Hope, I dreamed of being rich." "And now you're rich but lonely," Hope said. "And you're not rich and lonely. Maybe we should team up," Clive suggested. "In what way?" "Be friends, so we're not lonely." "Do you feel lonely right now?" "No. Neither do I. So, will we be friends?" Hope looked at him and nodded. "We will." They could have sat by the window forever, smiling and enjoying the view in the quiet evening. But Clive's phone rang. It was Ned. He was worried about an anonymous call and asked if anyone else had called Clive lately. Clive honestly replied that no one had. He then asked how things were going with the movers. Ned was outraged by the results of his investigation. He had personally visited the site. Some workers were indeed not following the rules. They had to conduct a total cleanup. Don, the shift leader, had to be replaced because it was his fault the firings began. He was hiring people illegally to pocket the money meant for the workers. Artie, the foreman, was also very upset about the situation. Now, Artie personally handles the hiring of workers and reports directly to Ned. Angelica seemed to have gotten herself a young lover, her 5th that year. All because Ned was balding, and she no longer found him attractive. Clive listened to Ned with half an ear, thinking more about whether Ned was being honest with him or playing some kind of game. After Ned, Clive called Stephen, who had already taken care of everything. First, he arranged for a new passport for Hope and would pick her up in the morning. Second, he uncovered the details about Don and his money laundering schemes. It turned out that Don was just a pawn, with Artie orchestrating the whole operation. Artie had received direct approval from Ned, who, as a co-owner, had the signing authority. According to the workers, Ned had been recruiting them for night shifts through Artie and others for a couple of years, pocketing the proceeds from reselling high-quality raw materials into his offshore accounts disguised as charitable donations. Stephen noted that there was no known benefactor donating hundreds of millions to a construction company. However, Ned had close ties with companies supplying substandard materials from India and China, with whom he was partners before merging with Clive's firm, and Ned officially ended the collaboration after a talk with Clive. However, it turned out he had only done so officially, continuing to purchase their products through intermediaries for so-called personal use, while in reality, all the cement was used for construction projects. Clive was shocked by what he heard. He had been so blind, handing over the firm's management to a scoundrel. And how much have they managed to do? Quite a lot, I assume. Almost everything, sighed Stephen. This is bad. Your signature is on all the acceptance acts for the materials. On paper, you're the fraudster, Clive. You're stealing money. If something happens, you're to blame. And don't forget, you're at the construction stage, meaning you could go to prison now. I trusted him, Clive lamented. Is there no way to prove my innocence? If we get a full confession from Ned admitting he deceived you and tried to kill me, Clive added quietly. Hope listened to Clive's conversation with his lawyer in silence, sinking into the chair, trying not to interfere. But the more she heard, the more she frowned. Clive wasn't just betrayed by his partner, he was also being set up as the culprit. Clive finished his conversation with Stephen and stared into the distance, rubbing his temples. Hope looked at him, wanting to approach and hug this kind-hearted person who was now distressed. She barely restrained this impulse. Clive turned to her. Tomorrow morning at 9, Stephen will come to pick you up to get your new passport. Thank you, Hope said excitedly. And I'll be out on business. I need to visit someone, so take the keys with you, as I might be late. That's not dangerous, is it? Hope's voice held such genuine concern that Clive smiled. No, it's not dangerous. I'm going to see a friend who used to work in the police and is now a private detective. I want to consult with him. It's late, isn't it? He yawned. Let's go to bed, we have to get up early tomorrow. Hope wished him good night and went to the bedroom. Lying under the blanket, she could hear Clive moving around the apartment, making the bed, brushing his teeth. She felt calm and peaceful. She felt safe. It was as if, after a long journey, she had finally come home. In the morning, when Hope woke up, Clive was already gone. His recent presence was betrayed by a dirty coffee cup on the table and an unmade bed. Hope sighed, tidied up, got dressed, washed, and waited for Stephen. She didn't feel like eating. The process of getting a new passport seemed too nerve-wracking. For Hope, getting this passport marked the beginning of a new chapter in her life. She wondered if they would change her photo. Stephen answered this question as soon as Hope opened the door for him. Good morning. Ready to go get your picture taken for the new passport? Seems like you are. Let's go, we're already running late. He seated her in the back seat, sat next to her, and commanded the driver. To the department. But first, to the photo studio. The driver nodded, and the car started moving. Meanwhile, Clive arrived at the needed address by taxi. Adjusting the medical mask that covered his not fully healed nose, he rang the intercom. A hoarse male voice answered. Yes. It's Clive. Charlie, is that you? The door buzzed open. Clive entered the building and took the elevator to the 5th floor. Charlie, the former policeman turned private detective, was already waiting for him on the landing. Hey, Clive, he said, hugging Clive and patting him on the back. How are you? What brings you here? Clive winced and grabbed his right side. I'm okay. Just broke a rib. Charlie frowned, gently moved aside the edge of Clive's mask, and said. Good grief. Let's go inside, Clive suggested, adjusting his mask. I don't want to be seen. Charlie and Clive had once been classmates. Charlie was Clive's first friend in the city after he moved. They used to skip chemistry together behind the school sports field, sitting and dreaming about the future. Charlie had always dreamed of working in the police force like his father. His father had died in the line of duty when Charlie was in 6th grade. Since then, he was raised by his mother, Maya. She knew Clive's mother, Rhoda, well as they both worked at the same factory. Both worried about their sons. How would they fare in life if they didn't want to study? Unlike their mothers, Charlie and Clive didn't worry and were confident they'd make it. Eventually, after school, their paths diverged. Charlie completed his studies, worked in the police for a while, got injured, and left the force. He started working as a private investigator to keep his elderly mother from worrying. She had always been against him following in his father's footsteps, fearing he might also be killed in the line of duty. Clive, after construction and private contracts, started developing his business. School friends called each other occasionally at first, congratulating each other on holidays, and checking in on each other's lives. But these calls became increasingly rare. Clive worked around the clock. Charlie also came home, kissed his sleeping mother, and fell into bed himself, only to wake up in the morning, put on his uniform, and go to the station. Despite not having been in touch with Charlie for a long time, Clive knew he could trust him. In his current situation, everyone he could trust was precious: Stephen, Derek, and Charlie. Everyone else was under suspicion in one way or another. They entered the small apartment. They were greeted by Maya, who seemed unchanged since Clive had last seen her at the graduation ceremony. Only her hair, tied back, had turned completely gray, and there were more wrinkles on her face. She smiled broadly, spreading her arms for a hug. "Who do we have here?" "Clive in the flesh. You recognized me even with the mask." Clive hugged her, removing the mask from his face. "I recognized you by your voice." Maya flinched when she saw his nose. "Oh my God, Clive. What happened?" "I had an unlucky ride on a motorcycle," Clive lied. "Nothing serious." Maya led them to the kitchen, seated them at the table, poured tea, and brought out some cookies. She then scolded Clive for not being careful enough on the road. Clive obediently listened and nodded. Finally, Maya finished her lecture, announced she was going to visit a neighbor, took a box of chocolates, and left, closing the door tightly behind her. Charlie turned to Clive, who was finishing a cookie. "So, who beat you up?" "Ned." "Ned? Why?" Clive explained the situation, not forgetting to mention that Stephen and the old reliable driver Derek were still on his side. He also described the scheme Ned was running. Charlie pondered. "What are you going to do?" "I'll hire lawyers," Clive laughed. "Lots of lawyers. Maybe I'll win." "And what if Ned confesses that he set you up and that you're innocent?" "Then all charges against me will definitely be dropped," Clive replied. Charlie got up from the table and went to another room. He rustled around, pulling out a drawer. Then he returned to the kitchen with a small box. Inside was a listening device. Clive grimaced. "Charlie, I don't think this is a good idea." "Is this even legal?" "No," Charlie replied, "but you want justice, right?" Clive held out his hand. Charlie placed the tiny device with a clip into it. "You have an office, right?" "Yes. A couple of floors." "And did you sign a contract with a security agency?" "Yes." "And what does it say about bugging?" Clive closed his eyes, trying to remember the contract conditions he had read over 5 years ago. "We can secure ourselves privately. There are cameras in my office and Ned's that record audio." "Well, that's great," Charlie said. "I doubt those cameras will be working properly if something happens. I think your Ned will make sure of that. So take the bug and attach it to some wires." Charlie explained to Clive that he needed to provoke Ned, to make him confess to everything. You could use Hope for this. Have her come to his office and demand money for her silence. Clive shook his head. Great plan. And she'll be killed right there on the spot. Charlie, I don't want to involve her in my affairs. She's already done so much for me. I'm helping her get a new passport now, but I doubt I can repay my debt to her with that. And you want to send her to Ned? Fine, Charlie said. I would ensure she has an escort and security, of course. But I see you're against involving Hope. Then you'll have to play the role of Jaleel again. They devised a plan. Clive would contact Artie, pretending to be Jaleel, and demand a large sum of money for his silence. If Artie refused, Clive would go to the company's co-owner and tell him everything, how he worked the night shift, helped steal bags of cement, wasn't paid the promised amount, and was beaten and left to die in a ditch by the roadside. They decided to make the call from a payphone to make it harder to trace Jaleel. Clive. Just in case, Charlie gave Clive a stun gun and pepper spray. They cleared the dishes and greeted Maya when she returned from her visit. Clive said his goodbyes and left the apartment. Charlie called out to him through the open door. Hey, jerk, call sometimes, will you? I will. You too, buddy, Clive shouted back. He hailed a taxi. At home, silence awaited him. Hope hadn't returned yet. Clive realized he had gotten used to Hope's presence in his home and his life. He decided to surprise her to celebrate her getting the new passport. He grilled steaks, opened a bottle of good wine, and started chopping vegetables for a salad. The intercom buzzed. Clive, holding his right side, walked to it and saw Stephen and Hope. He buzzed them in. When they entered, Clive immediately noticed Hope was wearing Stephen's sunglasses. Clive felt a pang of jealousy as he watched the lawyer help Hope take off her shoes. I see you two have gotten friendly. Hope said nothing and went to the bathroom, still wearing the sunglasses. Stephen pursed his lips. Clive, there's something. Didn't they issue the passport? Clive asked worriedly, gesturing for Stephen to sit at the table. No, the passport was issued, no problem there, Stephen replied, sitting on a bar stool. While we were waiting for the process to complete, we were downstairs having coffee, and Hope ran into an old friend. I didn't catch her name, though. What kind of friend? They lived together in the basement, in the workshop. You know what I mean. What happened next? At that moment, Hope came out of the bathroom and sat at the table. You'll see for yourself, Stephen smirked. Clive looked closely at Hope, vaguely suspecting something. He reached for her face and removed Stephen's sunglasses. Under Hope's eye was a huge bruise. Clive's eyes widened. What the hell is this? Fiona elbowed me when she tried to break free and run, Hope said. You got into a fight? Clive searched the freezer for ice. Hope, holding a pack of broccoli to her swollen cheek, explained how she ran into Fiona. The old friend had brought coffee to her and Stephen, pretending not to recognize Hope, although it was clear from her eyes and behavior that she did. Hope approached her when she was serving another table. She greeted her and politely asked how she was. Fiona snapped, claimed she didn't know Hope, and asked to be left alone. The commotion brought over the manager. Hope explained that Fiona was an old friend who had disappeared and made her worry. Fiona silently wiped the table during this. The manager asked Hope to sit back down and handle personal matters outside the cafe. She obediently returned to her table, drinking coffee and watching Fiona. When Fiona went outside, presumably to smoke, Hope got up and followed her. They stood on the sidewalk for a while. Hope recounted what she had gone through after Fiona disappeared from the workshop. Fiona silently blew a stream of smoke from her nose. She didn't answer Hope's questions about where she lived, with whom, or how she managed to get her passport back. Without a passport, Fiona wouldn't have been able to get a job. Fiona's phone rang. She moved as far away from Hope as possible to avoid her overhearing the conversation and hid the screen to prevent Hope from seeing the caller's name. But Hope figured it out. Fiona was talking to their former boss, the one who had ordered Hope to be beaten and taken her ID. Hope asked Fiona what connected her to the former boss. Fiona started lying, giving vague answers, and then admitted the truth. Yes, they let me go because I ratted you out. I told them you had no one, no family, no boyfriend. But my dad was looking for me. The boss was afraid their business would be exposed. No one was looking for you. And no one would. He wouldn't have taken your passport if you hadn't pissed him off back then. I told you, you shouldn't have stood up for me. Fiona stubbed out her cigarette and was about to leave. Hope asked if her current boss knew about her criminal record. Fiona looked scared. Hope realized that her former friend had decided to keep that part of her past a secret. Anger and resentment boiled inside her. How could she? Hope had tried to help and protect Fiona, and in return, she got a knife in the back. Hope headed back to the cafe to talk to the manager. She was very surprised when Fiona, instead of stopping her, suddenly took off running. Hope caught up with her, tackled her to the ground, and got an elbow to the eye from Fiona. She sat on top of Fiona, ignoring the people gathering around them, and asked, "Why did you decide to betray me? Don't you understand this is a betrayal?" "He paid me," Fiona smiled. Hope understood everything. She had been sold into slavery for another dose. She loosened her grip. Fiona broke free, pushed Hope off, and ran away. Stephen, who had been watching from the window, approached Hope. He quietly handed her his sunglasses. "Here, put these on. There's a first aid kit in the car. Let's go." Clive listened to Hope with a slight smile on his face. He then patted her shoulder encouragingly. "Well done. I'd punch Ned too if I had the chance." "There will be another chance," Stephen said. "I understand you had a romantic dinner planned for two, judging by the place settings. I won't intrude. Call me if you need anything." Before Clive and Hope could respond, Stephen had already left. Clive finished the salad, plated it, placed the meat in the center of the table, and poured wine into the glasses. Hope watched him silently, rubbing her bruised cheek. She ate silently too. Only during the toast, when Clive raised his glass and said, "To your new life. Cheers." She did respond weakly. "Cheers." After asking if Clive needed any help, she went to the bedroom. Clive couldn't quite understand her behavior. Was it because she had learned of her friend's betrayal or because they were being pushed together once again? Hope, left alone in the room, sat in the corner and sobbed, hugging her knees. Fiona, the one she had been worried about all this time and blamed herself for her disappearance, was responsible for the horror Hope had gone through, the humiliation, and the bruises on her face. Perhaps she should trust people less in the future. Anyone can betray, even those you trust the most. Like Clive, his best friend and business partner had betrayed him too. After calming down, she washed her face and went to bed. Clive was already snoring on the couch, disappointed by the ruined celebration. In the morning, Hope's voice woke him up. "Are you awake?" "No." "What's up?" "I made pancakes. Come and have breakfast." Clive sat up and sniffed the air. The aroma of coffee filled the room. Apparently, his broken nose had dulled his sense of smell. The swelling on Hope's cheek had gone down, leaving only a small bruise as evidence of yesterday's events. Pouring coffee into cups, Hope smiled and hummed to herself. "How are you?" Clive asked, pulling on his jeans. Hope frowned. "What do you mean?" "About yesterday. Your friend was cruel." Hope shrugged. "That's on her conscience. Let her live with it. My job is to cry and let go." "Well, are you coming?" "I'm going to eat without you." Clive smiled and sat down at the table. Over breakfast, He raised a toast and repeated. To a new life. To a new life, Hope replied, grinning widely, and clinked her cup with his. Then she ran to the room and brought back her new passport to show Clive. He flipped through it with a satisfied look. Then his face fell, and he handed the passport back to Hope, saying, Now you can find a job, a place to live. Yes, Hope's expression also changed, that's it. No one will sleep in your bed anymore. You can go back there. Clive weakly smiled. He thought to himself sadly. I'll be living alone again. A bold idea suddenly came to his mind, and he quickly voiced it. Maybe you should stay. Hope's eyes widened. Stay. How? Don't get the wrong idea, Clive began to explain, it would just be nice to live together like we do now. We'd sleep in different rooms. I'd cook macaroni and cheese, and you'd make soup. I don't think that's a good idea. Hope let out an awkward laugh. Why? You said you're lonely, and I'm lonely. He fell silent, seeing her blush. Clive himself was ready to sink through the floor with embarrassment, but he held his ground, waiting for her answer. Finally, Hope spoke. I want to go back to the village, she said carefully, looking at Clive, find a job, maybe buy a house, live the way I did before my parents died, you know. The city isn't for me. Clive nodded. He wouldn't mind going back to his parents' house either. Too bad the house had long been sold. That's why I can't stay, sorry. Hope smiled at him and started clearing the dishes. Stephen called Clive and urgently ordered him to come to the office because there was an unscheduled inspection. Everyone had been on edge since morning. Stephen hesitated to call Clive with the news, knowing he hadn't fully recovered, but the situation seemed serious. Ned could turn everything against Clive at any moment. Clive told Hope he had to leave quickly, grabbed his car keys, and rushed to the elevator. 40 minutes later, he entered the office. The police greeted him at the entrance. Good afternoon. We're conducting a search. Please show your ID. Clive pulled his passport out of his pocket. I'm Clive Turner, the co-owner of the firm. Oh, we've been waiting for you, the officer smiled and then shouted to someone, guys, the second co-owner has arrived. Take him in. 2 officers approached Clive. Follow us. He walked down the familiar corridor to Ned's office. Ned was sitting in his chair as usual, with his ever-present glass of whiskey on the desk. When he saw Clive, he jumped up and rushed toward him. The officers stepped outside and stood by the door. Ned pulled Clive away from the door into the office and whispered. Clive, we're in deep trouble, seriously deep. I don't know who set us up, maybe that scoundrel Don. I fired him, you know. He was hiring workers against all the rules and stealing from us. Or could it be Artie, what do you think? Clive silently watched Ned. Drops of sweat were forming on Ned's forehead. His face was flushed, and his eyes were wild. It was clear that the inspection had caught him off guard. Clive had planned to call Ned in a few days, posing as Jaleel, to arrange a meeting for a money transfer and get a confession out of him. But the circumstances were changing rapidly. He needed to come up with something urgently. Clive felt a listening device in his jacket pocket that Charlie had given him. I called them, Clive lied. Ned furrowed his brow. You called for the inspection. Why? I know what you're up to, Ned. I know you're reselling materials and keeping the money for yourself. Ned gasped, pointing a finger at his chest. Me? Clive, what are you talking about? You probably know that someone named Jaleel was recently at the construction site, snooping around, walking through the warehouses. You know him? Ned interrupted, revealing himself. That was me, Clive shot back, his eyes flashing. Silence fell in the office. Ned smiled and patted Clive on the shoulder. This is a joke, right? You're trying to prank me. Nice one, I fell for it. What joke? Clive shook his head. Ned's expression changed. The cocky smile disappeared from his lips. His gaze turned serious. He silently turned away, sat back in his chair, propped his feet on the table, took his whiskey glass, and began to drink slowly. Clive silently took a seat in the chair opposite Ned, glancing at the door still guarded by 2 police officers. Their backs were visible through the frosted glass. Well, Clive thought, now or never. "Why are you doing this to me, Ned?" he asked in a quiet voice, almost a whisper so no one could hear. "You understand I'm involved in all of this because of you." "Why?" Ned remained silent, sipping his whiskey. As the last ice cube melted in his glass, he began to shake it in his hand. "Why, you ask?" he smirked. "Because there's never too much money. Isn't it enough for you?" Clive was surprised. "The more you have, the more you want," Ned replied. Another oppressive silence fell over the office for a moment. "And why did you set me up?" Clive asked, raising his voice slightly. Ned hissed at him, nodding toward the door. "Lower your voice. No one knows anything yet. And they won't if you stay quiet. No one set you up. If you had kept your nose out of my business, everything would have been fine. But no, you had to be the righteous one and complain, run away. Well, maybe nothing will come out of this." "I'll make sure everything comes out," Clive replied. "People could get hurt. If the building collapses at any moment, what will you do? What do I care about what happens to that building?" Ned shot back. "My job is to build it. And so is yours." He gave Clive a menacing look, staring intently at his face before finally saying, "Now I see you're not lying. Your nose is still swollen. Looks like Don really gave you a beating. Watch it, don't cross me, or you'll end up like him." "How?" Clive frowned. On the bottom, Ned grinned, baring his teeth. "Are you threatening me?" "No. Just warning you. Don't get involved," Ned said firmly, looking Clive in the eye. "You'll regret it, Clive." At that moment, the door swung open. A man in uniform walked in, holding an earpiece in one hand. "Boss," he said, "everything, what do we do with them next?" Ned froze with his glass in hand. Then he slowly lowered his feet to the floor. Clive turned slightly to see the newcomer. He didn't recognize him. The situation was becoming increasingly tangled. After listening to the order, the stranger addressed Clive and Ned. "Okay, you both need to leave." "What does this mean?" Ned asked, his voice trembling as he shot an angry glance at Clive. "Is this you're doing? You've decided to rat me out? What a scoundrel you are, Clive." He lunged at Clive with his fists. Clive instinctively jumped to his feet and raised his arms to protect himself. But before he could react further, the police officers who had rushed into the office tackled Ned and dragged him out. The man with the earpiece turned to Clive. "Let's go." Clive left the office. The secretary and other staff members looked on in horror as the officers led Ned and Clive down the corridor. Clive noticed other agents from the special services rummaging through lockers, examining computers, and stuffing folders and equipment into boxes. When Clive's secretary saw him, she shouted, "Clive, what's happening?" "Everything's fine," he replied with a pleasant smile, "don't worry. Just do what they say." Outside, Clive heard Stephen's voice. He was trying to argue with the police officers who weren't letting him inside the building. Upon seeing Clive, the lawyer waved his arms frantically. "There he is, Clive. I represent him as his lawyer. You have no right to keep me away from my client. Do you understand?" The police officers relented and allowed him through the cordon. Stephen rushed up to Clive. He wanted to ask something, but the accompanying officers opened the door of a service vehicle. "Get in. Are you a lawyer? Are you coming with us?" They were taken for questioning. During the ride, Stephen, sitting next to Clive, turned to him several times, trying to reassure him. Don't worry. Hope can give witness statements. And your employees will confirm that you haven't been in the office. Ned has handled everything. Clive nodded silently. His hand in his pants pocket gripped the listening device Charlie had given him. He hoped desperately that all of Ned's words from a few minutes ago had been recorded. The sudden arrival of the police officer also gave him confidence that their conversation had been overheard and recorded. At the station, Clive and Stephen were led into an interrogation room. They were offered water and treated very politely. An officer walked in, introduced himself, and sat down at the interrogation table, laying out documents in front of him. I am Officer Mason Noble. You're Clive, correct? Your partner Ned is suspected of fraud. He's being charged with procurement fraud, specifically involving manipulation in construction tenders. Do you know anything about this? Yes, Clive replied. Ned tried to kill me when I found out about it. Is that so? Mason made some notes in the documents. Your testimony matches what Don told us earlier. Do you know him? Yes. He was the one in charge of security at the construction site that beat me up. Do you know anything about the motives that might have led Ned to commit fraud? Yes, he needed money. He loves money. Mason looked at Clive closely. He wrote something in the interrogation report and then asked Clive to check the records and sign. Stephen pulled the document toward himself, read it carefully for a while, and then handed it back to Clive for his signature. They were released but required to return for further questioning as the investigation continued. Once they exited the station, Stephen bombarded him with questions. Was it true that Clive had initiated the investigation? If so, why? And why hadn't he warned Stephen about his plans? It was so reckless and foolish. Clive couldn't give the lawyer a coherent answer. He himself barely understood what had just happened or whose fault it was, but he suspected that Don was involved. Apparently, he hadn't died, contrary to Ned's belief. He must have gotten angry at his former employer and decided to get revenge, which is why he had turned him in. Clive's head throbbed from all the thoughts. When he got into the car with Stephen, he asked him to take him to Charlie's place. But Charlie wasn't home. Maya greeted them, dressed in her usual robe. She noticed Clive's pale face and invited them for tea. Clive politely declined and pulled out the listening device in front of a surprised Stephen, handing it to Maya and asking her to give it to Charlie when he returned home. The elderly woman said nothing. She accepted the bug from Clive with a bewildered expression and then shook her head. So, you lied to me, Clive. Are you in trouble? Not anymore, he replied, patting Stephen on the shoulder as he headed down the stairs. At the bottom, Stephen stopped him and said quietly. Why didn't you tell me you were carrying a bug in your pocket? Just didn't have the chance, Clive shrugged. And why didn't you mention the detective? Clive couldn't find a response. Stephen drove him home, and as they were saying goodbye, he said. I thought we were friends, Clive. And you do things like this behind my back. Don't you trust me? What have I done to deserve this? Stephen, Clive said, I trust you more than anyone. I just didn't want to bother you unnecessarily. You've been dealing with my problems and helped organize Hope's passport. Why burden you even more? I get paid for that, Stephen laughed. He looked at Clive. They laughed and shook hands. Clive watched Stephen's car until it turned the corner of the house, then headed upstairs. At the door, he was met by a worried Hope. Clive, what happened? Is everything okay? She asked. Stephen called and said you were in trouble, told me to hide the laptop. What's going on? Clive smiled at her frightened face. He walked over to Hope and hugged her tightly, burying his face in her auburn hair. She froze, didn't resist, and shyly asked. What's going on? Is it that bad? Everything's fine, Clive replied, releasing her from the embrace. Everything is really good. What's that delicious smell? Is it pie? He walked over to the table, where a still warm pie sat on a plate. He took a piece and took a bite. Hope, looking reproachfully at him, said, "Clive, it's hot, you could burn yourself. Who eats like that? You're like a child." "More like a hungry dog," Clive laughed with his mouth full. "Go wash your hands," Hope said, pushing him out of the kitchen. "Quick!" He chuckled as he walked to the bathroom. After washing his hands, he splashed his face with cold water. Looking at his reflection in the mirror, he smiled, not quite knowing why. At the table, Hope watched Clive contentedly as he devoured his meal. When he finished every last crumb and began licking his fingers, she asked, "You have to admit, I cook better than any maid." Clive nodded. "Absolutely. Penny cooks well, but your pie is a masterpiece." "Where did you learn?" "My mom taught me. We used to cook together every weekend, pies, cookies. Dad loved those days and praised us. That's how we lived. My mom was the same way. She spent all Saturday in the kitchen. My dad and I would say, 'Mom, stop cooking, we'll do it ourselves.' And she'd reply, 'It brings me joy.'" Hope fell silent for a moment. Then she asked shyly, "If I stay with you, like you suggested, will you stop inviting that Penny?" Clive wiped his mouth with a napkin and looked at Hope. "Do you want to stay?" "I'm asking theoretically," Hope replied, getting up from the table. "Theoretically," Clive smiled. "I would keep using Penny's services so you'd have more free time for yourself. But if you're against it, I would stop inviting her." "What have you decided to do next, Hope? Are you leaving?" "I want to visit my parents at the cemetery," Hope answered, taking his dirty plates. "Everything is probably overgrown there." "Could you," she blushed, "could you lend me a little money? I'll pay you back once I get settled." Clive sighed and looked at Hope, who was drying the plates with a towel. "Are you dressed? Let's go." "Where?" Hope asked, surprised. "To the cemetery. To see your parents." "Don't protest," he added, noticing her raised eyebrow. "I'll take you. I'll help however I can. And you can help me clean up my parents' grave later. Sound good?" Hope quickly put the clean plates in the cupboard and replied shyly, "Okay, let's go. We just need to stop by the store on the way to buy flowers." It was a 2-hour drive to her hometown. During the ride, Hope looked out the window as a light rain began to fall. Clive drove smoothly, glancing at Hope occasionally. Then she turned on the music. The songs were familiar to both of them, and they began to sing along. The drive became more cheerful. They turned into a supermarket on the edge of the town, from which Hope had recently escaped through an impenetrable forest. She hesitated for a long time to get out of the car, afraid to face her former boss. Clive persuaded her, promising that he wouldn't let anyone hurt her. They grabbed a cart and walked along the aisles, stopping occasionally. Suddenly, a woman's voice called out from behind them. "Hope." They turned around. A woman in her 50s approached them. "Don't you remember me? I'm Lydia. I worked with your mom." "Oh." Hope exclaimed, hugging the woman. "Hello. Of course, I remember." Lydia examined the contents of their cart. "Did you come to visit the graves? That's good. The cemetery is such a mess. The village isn't any better. There's no work. The youth are moving to the city. Those who stayed also go to the city, only coming back home on weekends, like me. The school is closed, and the factory went bankrupt." Hope's expression darkened. "Where do you live now, Hope?" "Here." "And who is this husband?" Lydia looked at Clive. "I live," Hope began, then suddenly said, "You know, I want to come back." "Why?" Lydia asked, surprised. "Are you out of your mind? What's there for you?" "It's lonely in the city," Hope smiled. "Lonely," Lydia echoed with a smile. But isn't it lonely in the village right now? 3 people on the whole street. It's your choice, of course, Hope, but I wouldn't come back. You're young, it's easier to find work in the city. A little girl about 5 years old ran up from behind and hugged Lydia's leg. Grandma, are you going to buy me ice cream? Lydia laughed, stroking the girl's head, and introduced her to Hope. This is my granddaughter. My daughter just had her second child. Well, we're off. She took the girl's hand and headed to the checkout. Goodbye, Hope. Hope waved at Lydia and her granddaughter, feeling confused as she looked at Clive. They continued on their way. In the car, after buckling her seatbelt, Hope admitted. I feel uneasy now. Is it really that bad in the village? We'll see soon enough, Clive replied. He started the car. There were no people at the cemetery. The creaking gate sounded lonely. The paths were overgrown. Many graves were covered in weeds that reached waist height. Hope struggled to find her parents' grave. She put on gloves and started cleaning. Clive retrieved a trimmer from the trunk and began cutting the weeds. They replaced the artificial flowers and sat on a bench across from the grave, looking content at their handiwork. It's sad here, Hope said, glancing around. My parents' grave is tidy, but everything else is overgrown. Have you changed your mind about coming back? Clive asked. Hope remained silent. After leaving the cemetery, they drove to the village. A new house was being built on the ashes of her former home. The plot had been seized in favor of the bank and apparently sold. On the street Hope had known since childhood, only 3 houses remained inhabited. The others were abandoned, and those that still had life in them looked foreign and unwelcoming. They left the village and returned to the city, but instead of taking the turn toward the main highway, Clive directed the car toward the village where he was born and spent his early childhood. The houses here looked well maintained, each with a garden filled with blooming lilies along the roadside. Sun-ripened cherries and green apples peeked out from behind fences. Elderly women sat on benches near the fences, watching the cars go by. Birds flew low against the backdrop of the sunset sky. Hope smiled. This place resembled the village she remembered from her childhood much more than her own. Clive pulled off the road to the shoulder near a wrought iron fence that surrounded the cemetery. They entered the cemetery grounds. Here, too, many graves looked abandoned and neglected. They trimmed the grass around his parents' graves, with Hope taking a turn with the trimmer after noticing Clive grimace as he walked, rubbing his right side. Afterward, they drove to his parents' house. They stopped briefly on the shoulder, gazing at the curtains in the windows, the potted flowers on the sills, and the cat on the fence. Someone was living in the house. As they left the village, Clive asked Hope. So, where to now? Home. She shot him a piercing look. Home. On the way to Clive's place, they hit a traffic jam. The city was returning from work after a long day, and cars flooded the roads, honking. They finally pulled up to the apartment around midnight and headed up to their floor. Clive said he wanted to take a shower. While he washed, Hope put on the kettle and started preparing a light dinner. Suddenly, a scream echoed from the bathroom. She dropped the knife, wiped her hands on the hem of her shirt, and rushed into the bathroom. Clive stood naked, one hand pressed against the wall while the other clutched his side, his face contorted in pain. Hope quickly threw a robe around him, tied the belt, and helped him to the couch, saying, "Should I call an ambulance? You never got help." "I trust you," he smiled. Hope shook her head and called for an ambulance. The crew that arrived carefully removed his bandage. Hope gasped. Clive's entire right side was bruised. They placed him on a stretcher and carried him out of the apartment. Clive managed to shout to Hope. "The keys are in my jacket pocket." She grabbed his jacket from the hook and followed the crew outside. At the hospital, Clive got an X-ray, confirming a fractured rib. Additionally, he was diagnosed with a bruised lung and was kept in the hospital for a week. Hope sat by his bedside all night, entertaining Clive with stories from her childhood. By morning, she curled up at his feet and fell asleep. He gently stroked her head, feeling happy that a broken rib could bring him such joy. In the morning, as soon as she woke up, Clive sent Hope home to take a shower, get a good night's sleep, and eat something. She promised to visit him and left. She put on his jacket to keep warm in the morning fog. As she was leaving the room, Clive smirked and warned her. "There's a wallet in the pocket, there's no password on the cards, so feel free to use it, but don't spend it all." Hope snorted. It wasn't until she got back to her apartment that she realized how much Clive trusted her. She took a shower and collapsed into bed, feeling utterly happy. Clive spent 10 days in the hospital. During that time, his cheek healed completely, and his rib stopped bothering him. The only reminder of the incident was a small bruise on his right side. Stephen and Hope visited him daily. Derek also came by, stopping at Clive's home to check on him, but upon finding only Hope there, he rushed to the hospital. Charlie and his mother came to visit. The latter got teary-eyed upon seeing Clive lying in the hospital bed. She had managed to bring some chicken broth from somewhere and began feeding him with a spoon, ignoring his protests and laughter, saying, "This is to help your bones heal. Eat up, Clive, don't be difficult." Hope brought him homemade meals, something different each time. Stephen brought updates about the progress of the case. One evening, as Clive lay in his hospital room with the TV on, he suddenly heard his name and the name of his company. He asked for the volume to be turned up. The report was about the exposure of a criminal network led by Ned, revealing that all the buildings awarded contracts by Clive's company would undergo inspections due to concerns about structural integrity caused by violations of construction protocols. Clive felt a heaviness in his heart. The project he had built from the ground up over so many years was now tainted by scandal. His reputation would be ruined, even if everything turned out fine and he was declared innocent. Researcher Mason visited Clive's room. After greeting him, he pulled a chair closer to the bed, sat down, and spoke seriously. "Well, Clive, how are you feeling?" "Better, thank you," Clive replied. "Why didn't you seek help sooner?" Mason squinted. "Do you have something to hide?" "I didn't know who to trust." "I was scared," Clive confessed. Mason lowered his voice. "You have a problem, Clive. We listened to the recording of your conversation with Ned yesterday, and today it's gone. It seems there's a reason for your distrust. Someone is protecting him from above." Clive replied quietly. "I have a recording too. I can share it." He dictated Charlie's address and name to the investigator, explaining the circumstances under which Charlie had given him the recording. Mason smirked. "You're lucky, Clive. Seems like you've done a lot of good in your life." Mason left, and an hour later, Clive called Charlie, speaking in an annoyed tone. "Clive, are you out of your mind? You need to warn me about visits like that. It's good my mother wasn't home, she would have been in shock." 3 cops came in demanding the recording right from the start. Clive chuckled foolishly. He apologized to his friend and asked how his conversation with the investigator went. Mason didn't contact him again until Clive was discharged. Stephen and Hope came to pick him up, helping him to the car and up to the apartment. It was dark inside. Clive turned on the light and saw a crowd of people gathered around the kitchen table, Maya with her son Charlie, Derek with his wife. A cake sat on the table. When the lights came on, Charlie and Derek shouted, "Congratulations!" Everyone joined in. Clive smiled shyly, hugged everyone, shook Derek's hand, and said, "You didn't have to do this. I just got out of the hospital, it's just a minor occasion." "Clive," Maya exclaimed, "are you an idiot? Happy birthday, dear, happy birthday." Clive stood frozen, and only then did he realize it was indeed his birthday. He had forgotten. Probably because he hadn't celebrated it in the last 10 years. They insisted he blow out the candles on the cake. The guests had a cup of tea and some cake before leaving, not wanting to wear Clive out. Stephen also left, casting a mysterious glance at Clive and Hope before he went. This time, Clive couldn't hold back and replied. "Yeah, you've got it right." "I was right," the lawyer smirked. "I'm always right, aren't I, Clive?" Hope didn't understand anything from their conversation and didn't have time to think about it. She was trying to get the dishwasher to work. When they were alone in the apartment, Clive approached her and took her hands. "Hope, let's talk." "About what?" she blushed. "I'm not a boy anymore. I want a wife, children. I like you. I'm ready to wait as long as it takes. I'm willing to give you everything you ask for. Will you marry me, Hope? Will you be my wife?" Ignoring her protests, he dropped to one knee, wincing in pain, and pulled out a ring that had been passed down in his family from mother-in-law to daughter-in-law. After her husband's death, Clive's mother, Rhoda, had given the ring to her son, telling him to gift it to the woman he loved. That woman turned out to be Hope. She looked from Clive to the ring in his hand, and he continued. "We've known each other for a short time. You don't know me well, but I assure you, I'm a good man. What do you say?" "No," Hope replied quietly, "no, I can't agree. I won't marry you." Clive felt as if he had been struck to the heart. What had he been thinking, proposing to such a young girl he had only known for a couple of weeks? Seeing the disappointment on his face, Hope smiled. "I can't accept it, not because I don't like you. I do like you." A spark of hope ignited in Clive's eyes. "It's true, we don't know each other well enough she blushed. "For such a serious step. Maybe we can just be friends for now." "Friends?" Clive echoed. "Well, or maybe something more than friends." Hope stumbled over her words, "like boyfriend and girlfriend." Clive looked at the ring, stood up, and dropped to the other knee. "All right," he smiled, "I'm sorry, I'm doing this for the first time, and it turned out silly." "Hope, will you be my girlfriend?" "Yes," she breathed out, her face lighting up with happiness. Clive, smiling, slipped the ring onto her finger, stood up, and asked. "May I kiss you?" Hope pointed to her cheek. He laughed and gave her a quick peck. Hope kissed him back and said. "Let's go for a walk, okay? It's lovely outside, the rain has passed, and the air is fresh." They walked hand in hand along the sidewalk, discussing their future plans when Clive's phone rang. It was Mason. "Clive, good afternoon. We've included the recording in the case, and we found a rat and lost our senior lieutenant. The trial is coming up. Has your lawyer informed you?" "No." "Well, he'll let you know soon. You'll be called as a witness. Your attendance is mandatory. I hope that's clear." After the conversation with the investigator, Clive noticeably perked up. But anxiety settled in his heart. How many more rats did Ned have, if even among the police? Was he in danger? What about Hope? What about his friends? Would Ned want revenge on him? Did they catch Artie too? He got answers to all his questions a week later when he was summoned to a court hearing. It turned out that Don was the one who had initiated the investigation. He was facing charges in the tender case. After Clive had been beaten and taken to the woods, Artie contacted Ned to report the incident. Ned flew into a rage, insisting that they make sure the worker was dead and wouldn't spill anything. When Don arrived a couple of hours later at the location where they had dumped Clive, finding no one there, Ned became even angrier. He threatened Don, who, terrified for his life, fled with all the cash he had. Ned's men tracked him down, broke into the room where he had stayed overnight, beat him up, and took his money. They then shoved Don into his car and threw it off a bridge. Miraculously, Don survived and managed to swim to shore. Wanting to save himself more than seek revenge, he reported Ned and all his men to the police. It all seemed comical. A soaked and angry Don didn't come across as very convincing to the investigative committee as he complained about an attempted murder. Besides, he reeked of alcohol. The night before, he had been drinking with local girls at a roadside cafe. Mason, seeing him for the first time, said to his colleague, "Another hero who drowned his car in a drunken stupor and blames the government and a conspiracy against him." They might not have pursued the case, but everything Don said was confirmed the next day when Mason and a few other investigators visited the construction site at night, accompanied by arrested Don, and saw a truck. "Here!" Don shouted triumphantly. "Do you believe me now? There's the money, it's leaving." Ned remained calm during the trial. He didn't attempt to deny his guilt and agreed with the accusations. But when it came to the charge of murdering his partner, he suddenly started accusing Clive of also receiving kickbacks from all the deals. Clive, sitting on the witness stand, was seething after giving his testimony, listening to his former partner. Stephen, sitting next to him, patted his shoulder in support, urging him to stay calm. Ned was confident that the recording of his conversation with Clive had been destroyed. When the prosecutor, Mason, played it in court, Ned turned pale with surprise and looked at Clive with a kind of admiration. The court had no doubts about one partner's guilt and the other's innocence. They refused to press charges against Clive. However, they did bring an additional charge against Ned for the attempted murder of two individuals. He was found guilty, a date for the next hearing was set, and he was led out of the courtroom in handcuffs. At the entrance, Clive was met by a worried Charlie. "Well," he asked, "did it work?" "Guilty of fraud and attempted murder," answered Stephen with a satisfied smile. Charlie laughed, shook Stephen's hand, hugged Clive, and said, "Congratulations. Now you can plan a wedding," the lawyer remarked sarcastically as he headed for the exit. Clive, walking beside him, shook his head. "No, I asked her, and she said no." "What are you talking about?" Charlie asked, blinking stupidly. "What wedding? You didn't know." Stephen replied, "Our Clive is in love with his rescuer, Hope." Charlie smiled, "I knew there was something between you two. I'll be the best man." "There won't be any wedding," Clive mumbled, embarrassed, "we're just living together for now. Getting to know each other better. Just make sure you marry her before the baby comes." Stephen laughed, adjusting his glasses. "You might not notice when he tears up your passports and flushes them down the toilet. I'm not going through that again. Last time, I had to take a lady out on a date to get her to issue a new passport for Hope. She still calls me, demanding a relationship. I barely escaped the restaurant while she finished my whiskey." They escorted Clive to the car, and he drove home to Hope. She greeted him with her usual smile. "You're back. Stephen called me and told me everything. Congratulations." "And congratulations to you," Clive replied, lifting her in his arms and twirling her around. Hope screamed. "Clive, put me down right now, your rib is still injured." He set her down gently, hugged her, and kissed her on the temple. Smiling, he said, "Congratulations to you too, Hope. Your boyfriend, even with a broken rib, is not a criminal."